Right, there you go. You know, I'm not a big, I don't have a big sweet.
It almost had snow on the side.
I usually go by that. I just, what is my?
It's like balance.
Oh.
Yeah.
Okay. I know, so I'm glad I brought it, it doesn't work. See if we put it in. If you're gonna be, it doesn't work.
Yeah, it went out Thursday.
I
We got this one now.
don't know. Oh, it's something. Didn't you say?
7 o'clock, I'd like to call a meeting over. Start with pledge of allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States and to the republic which stands one nation.
Michael Behrman,
Present.
Kathy Michael,
Yes, here.
Tom Graham,
Here,
Jamie Melky,
Here.
Wendy Reed.
Here.
We have a quorum.
anyone in the audience like to address the council or do any subject that's not on the board?
Good evening, Mayor and City Council.
Internet.
My name is George Pete. I'm a resident at 508 West Fourth Street and business owner at 289 East Main. I wanted to express my interest in filling the vacancy that is presently before us on the Harbor Commission. Maybe briefly explain a little bit about why I'm interested, what my qualifications are, and take any questions if anyone has it. So I am, for those of you who don't know, a professional sailor. I race sailboats all over the world. I have for 25 years now. I've been very fortunate to travel all over the world to fishing ports and the most luxurious super yacht marinas. I've kind of seen the entire gamut of coastal communities. I feel like I'm uniquely qualified to play a hand in forming the future of our waterfront and our marine. Anyone have any questions they'd like to ask me? Okay, I would like to stay until the agenda item appears, but I have some childcare issues, so I have to go home. Thank you. Have a good night.
Good night, guys. Anyone else?
We do have,
Good evening, everyone. I just want you to know that I have also applied for the Harbor Commission.
your name.
Oh, Karen Straub Donnelly, I'm sorry, it's listed as Karen Donnelly on your agenda. I've been on the Harbor Commission. I have lived here 30 years. I've spent a lot of time on the waters as a boater, paddler, sailor, powerboat, all above. I understand the issues related to the harbor, the boat, the powerboat, sailboat versus the paddler issues, the view being important and the safety of all those involved in the harbor. So you've all seen a copy of my application. So I just want to make notice that I'm also applying, would love to join again the Harbor Commission and continue to make a commitment and a contribution to the city. Thank you.
Thank you, Karen. Anyone else?
Mayor, we have someone online, Maureen Kenny.
Okay.
Maureen?
Yeah, hi, good evening. Maureen Kenny, 134 West Bay Street. This is an administrative comment and probably falls back on Victor and his staff. You know, as we turn over to a government style of transparency, is it possible to have all meeting agendas? Can you hear me?
Yes.
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 Sorry, it was interrupted. I heard a voice in the background. So, but is it possible to have all the meeting agendas and packets archived on the website, similar to the way meeting minutes are? So currently, when a new agenda and packet is posted, it populates over the prior meeting. So you never have access to go back to that unless you personally download it and save it yourself. So I was just asking that from City Council and from the administrative staff, if that's something easy enough to put on the website so our citizens who are becoming more engaged would have access to prior information. Thanks.
Anybody else online?
Well,
Let's go on to the regular minutes and start with the bills, the minutes.
like the consent agenda.
Yeah, start with the consent agenda. Anybody have any questions on the regular minutes? December 16th?
I did send council corrected minutes based on some comments. City Clerk Whitaker can't be here today, so he had me make the changes and send them to you. I actually left out the Harbor Commission section with appointments, December 16th meeting. So in the red line, you see that we add the Harbor Commission appointments to the council packet. And we also have some clarifications on one of the DDA terms, as well as striking out the old and new business, which was the old and new business from the previous December 5th meeting, as opposed, so there was no old new business discussed at December 16th. Well, we would need.
I would make a motion that we approve the consent agenda as presented.
I have one question. Can we make sure to get an updated Ice Fest application to the new form with the completed, like, the new form asks for a map with details, and it also asks all of the department heads to sign off on it. I think it would be good to have it on file.
We can do that. We can have Becky create a new, what Councilmember Melky's talking about is this is the old event application form. This is the old logo. We have an updated one on the website, so. It has a different check who approves it,
I looked at it.
and yeah, so yeah, we can get that. We
Thank
can
you.
have Becky fill that, DDA fill that out. And yeah, and Becky said she would note she could note the return route for the carriage on the map that she supplied here.
And then where is the road being got found, or is, it just said barricades?
Lucas, you want
Becky did say that they weren't looking to actually close the road completely off. Maybe just a barricade in the parking spot, just so we know where they would be dropping people.
No,
They're gonna,
put it down by where the farmers market.
Okay,
It's like,
that was my only question.
yeah, like what we did last year, but not any of the Bay Street area.
we plan on closing it the same as a farmer's market from State and Maine all the way down to Zorn Park.
Okay.
That's what she'd asked for.
Second, the motion to approve the consent agenda with the changes as mentioned.
roll call, yeah.
Wendy Reeve,
Yes.
Jamie Melky,
Yes.
Tom Graham,
Yes,
Kathy Macho,
Yes.
Michael Barron.
Yes.
Motion passes.
you wanna talk about the, with the
All right, then, the first agenda on the item is a presentation by Patrick Boland. He's the CEO and general manager of the Michigan Public Power Agency, which the Harbor Spring Utility is a member of. They are essentially a consortium of different utilities electric utilities that work together to purchase energy, and they do a lot more than just purchase energy on our behalf. They manage our electric utilities portfolio. So he's going to give an overview. We haven't had MPPA present in a couple of years, so I think all of you council members, this will be the first presentation you hear from the MPPA. We always regularly have a lot of consent agenda items for the MPPA regarding purchases and talking about our plans. I think it had a good overview level from Patrick on what that's all about and what it means and why it's important. And it's some very technical stuff, but he's gonna try to boil it down in a way that can be understood.
Thank you, Victor. Thank you for having me. It's been a while since I've been up here. See a few new faces. So try to get out to each of our members. There's 22 of them around the state, so it's difficult to get to each member every year, given the workload and requirements, but every couple of years, I like to get to each one of our members and talk about what's happening in this very dynamic industry. So I put together a slide deck. I don't need to go through all these slides. Don't frighten anyone here. And I really don't even need slides, but I wanted something just to sort of mark the conversation. And probably most importantly, just to re-familiarize yourself with what's happening in the electric industry and MPPA as well. Just so I don't accidentally irritate anyone, like 10 minutes, 15 minutes-ish, is that right? Okay, so why don't we you're gonna control, there we go. So what is Michigan Public Power Agency? So if you go across the United States, there's about 50 to 60 joint action agencies. They were largely formed in the 1970s, some in the late 60s, a few in the 80s, and there might have been a few after that, but the vast majority are 1970s, and they're very simple reason. Power supply cost, inflation was skyrocketing at the time. There was something called an oil embargo that was happening at the time, and the only way to generate least cost amount of power is to build a big power plant. At that time, it was coal, and the bigger you built it, the lower the cost of the power. Well, obviously, if you're a very small city or a village, like Harbor Springs, building and participating in a large power plant was just not something you could do on your own. So enabling legislation was passed across each state to form a legal entity that could own resources, that could sue and be sued. They were essentially a municipal electric utility just like you are. And in Michigan in 1976, there was a law, Act 448 was passed to allow these utilities to work together. And in 1978, MPPA was formed. So we have 22 members. Don't know exactly, I forget exactly what Harbor Springs peak load is, but you're about 2% of our largest member, which is Lansing Board of Water and Light. So it gives you some level of proximity in terms of your size. I think Harbor Springs is probably one of the smaller members we have, if not the smallest in terms of actual electric sales. But you all have the same needs. And that is, can you build a portfolio of power supply resources to reduce your cost and reduce your risk and compete in an industry now that's under profound change? Next slide. So this is just some vital statistics, if you will. I talk in megawatt hours and gigawatts, and here people probably refer to things in kilowatts or watts. But when you have 22 cities that each have big industrial bases, we talk in gigawatts. So we're about 1.4 gigawatts of peak load and just under 7 million megawatt hours of annual sales. Next slide. So we're a project-based agency. There's really two different types of joint action agencies across the United States. There's an all requirements agency and a project-based. Project-based is the hardest for the leader of the organization, but I think it's the best model for the member. So the member chooses the projects that best fit their needs. And you might ask, well, why did that happen in Michigan? Well, in Michigan, we had a history actually of public power utilities building and owning their own power generation. So if you've been to Holland and Lansing before, you'll see big power plants there. They actually power plants that they own. So an agency that was modeled so that members could choose the projects that best fit their needs. And therefore, of our 22 members, they don't all participate in all of our projects. We have 8 projects at the Joint Action Agency. And there's a intermixing, some as small as 5 members participate in the Kalkaska CT project to as great as 21 members in our energy services project. Next slide. So I don't really need to spend too much time here. All to say though is we're a professional organization. We have a board of commissioners. Each member has a seat on our board. It's a democratic vote. There's also project committees, and there's a chair and vice chair and a committee there. And the board respects the project. So when the project makes a decision, it recommends that decision to the board. And it's never happened in my 9 years as CEO, and I don't know if it's ever happened in the history of the agency, but it'd be a rare occasion if the board were ever to disagree with the project's recommendation. The board basically is the fiduciary of the organization. I report to the executive, well, I report to the whole board, but the executive committee of the board is who I really work with on the strategic plan, staffing of the agency, et cetera. Next slide. So what is a Joint Action Agency? Real simple. We share resources. I'm shared by 22 members. So my salary, my benefits, my staff salary, our systems. But the real thing that you share is power supply. Those could be assets, electric generation assets that we own, or they could be assets that we contract for. And the decision to buy and own versus contract is really an economic decision. So if you look over the last 6-7 years, we've done just over $1 billion worth of contracted power arrangements with renewable resources. And you might ask, well, why did you enter into contracts as opposed to invest? It's because the US tax code. The IRS has a production and investment tax credit. Well, we're not a taxable entity. We're a nonprofit just like you, so we couldn't harvest the tax benefits there. So we had to work with a private company who could harvest those tax benefits in exchange for a lower price of power. So we also own electric transmission. Those are the big lines you see when you're driving your car from time to time that move the power from different load centers. So really, it's about lowering risk and lowering power supply costs. So Harbor Springs can participate in a huge wind project or a large gas project, and get the economics that a large investor-owned utility would get, but only take a very small share. Does that make sense? Okay, next slide. So again, economies of scale, pretty basic economic principle that some of us learned back in high school. There's also, the world's changing though. Those of you that read the paper, energy's in the news almost all the time now. It's a really exciting industry to be in. It's because it's really undergoing some pretty transformational changes and some challenging issues as well with reliability. But we've had to expand our capabilities too, because back in the old days, we were just a wholesale power provider to our members. But now we can't actually do our job without knowing what's going on in your distribution system. So Victor probably is getting calls from a lot of my staff all the time, wanting to know more and more information about what's happening here, the status of your AMI metering, your interconnection policies, your readiness for distributed energy resources. These are all things we care about because the industry is rapidly needing to deal with these issues, and you as a utility need to keep up. Next slide. So we really operate under 4 principles. Competitiveness, right? If we're gonna bring value back to our members, there has to be a competitive reason for them to be a member of the Joint Action Agency, and economies of scale, of course, is the way to do that. Risk management. Electricity is the most volatile commodity on the planet. And we have more volatility now, except for some of these new commodities, maybe like crypto, but if you want to call them those. But as far as traditional commodities, electricity has the most price movement of any commodity. And so that requires very rigid risk management policies to reduce risk for our members. Obviously, industry expertise, an industry that's changing as rapidly as ours, we have to have people on staff that understand these changes. And what happens day to day in our business, we're doing market operations. That's scheduling, bidding, offering, settling power supply in the markets every day. Markets settle on the hour. So these are all the things you don't see. You just run your utility, you turn your light switch on, and everything seems to be happening just fine, but behind the scenes, there's a lot of activities going on day to day. And then, of course, sharing, which I already talked about. Next slide. So we have a strategic plan. It's a 5-year plan. It gets updated every 3 years. And those 4 circles are really what sort of the key aspects of our plan. Decarbonization, which was and still will remain a big part of the power supply industry. You know, we're reducing the amount of fossil fuels that are used for producing electricity. Engagement, really key. In a complicated industry, we need our members to be very engaged with us so we can help make big decisions for them. And without being engaged, that's tough. That's why we're always asking our members to participate in our board meetings or to come on our calls. Unfortunately now, we're able to do a lot of things virtually, so that it's a lot more productive than driving, 4 hours down to Lansing. Working with end use customers, you don't have as big a challenge in this community because most of your electric loads in this town are very small, a lot of residential users. However, even that's changing. Everyone here has got some kind of smart thermostat or will in your home. And that's really what the last item is, which is called decentralization. So things are getting smaller, smarter, at the industrial level, at the commercial level, and of course at the residential level. And that activity changes the way electricity is used day to day and hour to hour. Next slide. So Michigan back in the end of 2023 passed a whole suite of various different pieces of legislation, which requires this state to increase its renewable power supply portfolio. That's the amount of energy that's produced from renewable resources. You can see the statistics there. There's also a clean energy standard that also kind of operates in parallel. The big cliff in this is really 2030, and it's very scary to us because these resources, for reasons I'll talk about here on the next slide, do you want to move there? Don't produce the same amount of energy, nor do they provide the same amount of reliability as fossil fuel resources. That's really the biggest challenge. So what this depicts here is that on the left, you can see solar, wind, and gas in terms of the amount of energy they produce as percent of the years. We think about 8,760 hours in a year. Typical gas plant produces electricity about 80% of those hours. Nuclear is probably 85, maybe even up to 90% in some cases. But wind and solar are 20% in Michigan and mid-30s on the wind side. So it's a significant drop in the amount of energy per installed megawatt. The other really challenging issue is reliability, which is the 3 buckets on the right. And again, kind of similar math. Gas and nuclear is up in that sort of high 80s. Wind and solar are below 30% in terms of the amount of electric reliability they provide the grid. The other problem with solar and wind is they take up a lot of property. Probably about 10 times the amount of property as a fossil fuel plant in the case of solar, and maybe even 20 times in the case of wind. So we have property challenges and we have reliability and energy challenges. So that's really the challenge for us, is how do we continue to expand that portfolio while meeting the reliability and affordability of the people who pay the bills and expect the power to be reliable for them. Next slide. So one of the things you're probably reading about and is pretty interesting, and this little pictorial helps understand, this is annual electric load growth. And you can see that really for all of the 2000s, really up until 2020, we've had almost meager to no load growth, 0. And the reason for that is anything that got added got taken away through energy waste reduction. There was obviously there was COVID, there was a Great Recession. These things dropped electric consumption dramatically. But you can see now forecasts are for greater than 3% a year. So you got to go back to the 1980s. Well, what was happening in the 1980s? We were building a lot of power plants. 3% of a 25,000 megawatt system, which is what Michigan is a lot of capacity every year. It's a whole new power plant annually. So why is this happening? Well, again, these are forecasts. We don't know for sure if they'll come true, but you have primarily data centers that are crunching computing power, essentially. There's other reasons for that, electrification, although that's been subdued more recently, onshoring of manufacturing. But the real key is data centers. They are the huge consumer of electricity and are really gonna require us to profoundly change what we're doing here and quickly need to start building some new power plants to serve this growing electric load. So I mentioned that there's challenges on the reliability and the affordability side. This pictorial, which may be hard for somebody to see, so if you can't see it, don't worry about it, I'll just explain it to you. That red area is called the high risk area. So there's this organization called NERC. They're sort of like the reliability coordinator for the United States. They measure the risk factors of the entire United States and they break it into these regions that you can see here. And you notice that Michigan is in the high risk. And the reason for that is because we've been retiring a lot of coal plants at a pretty rapid pace, haven't been building much, if any, new gas plants and then adding more renewables. Well, the amount of reliability on the system has been declining, the amount of reserves. And so we need to start adding reserves because power plants are just machines. They break just like any other machine does. And when they break, another power plant has to be there to provide power because you don't want your lights to go off. So we have some work to do here. And so some of the times you're approving power supply transactions, you haven't been through any investments recently. The reason we're doing that is we're trying to stay 5 years ahead so that we're constantly ensuring that we have enough power supply 5, 6, 7 years from now to ensure that when we get there, that we don't have any kind of reliability issues. Next slide. So as I mentioned earlier, our state is decarbonizing. We've added a lot of renewables, and just note in Harbor Springs, 10% of your energy supply came from renewable resources in 2015. In 2025, it's 27%. That's a huge change. And so far, reliability hasn't suffered. To get to 50% though, some difficult decisions have to be made. And those are the kind of decisions that my staff and I are thinking about every day. And we've got a strategic plan, of course, that we're following to address those issues. But you can see a very profound change in the kind of resources that are being used to supply power to Harbor Springs. Next slide. So finally, we perform a business and credit risk assessment annually for every one of our members, and the report is to be taken seriously. And I'm not going to get into the details of it now because Victor hasn't had time to socialize it to the city council or to other staff. All to say, however, though, that we're counting on you to have strong financials, because if our members don't have strong financials, we can't go out and perform the kind of business activities you expect from us. And the weaker credit worthiness members are going to suffer down the road. Lack of competitiveness, challenges buying power through the agency, and your costs will rise. So we're really trying to ensure that our members, particularly in light of the changes that are happening, that modernizing your distribution systems and ensuring that you have good stewards of your financial resources, fixed charge coverage ratios, cash reserves, liquidity. These are very, very important metrics that a utility needs to have and be mindful of. And we use credit rating agencies like S&P and Moody's and Fitch. We use their metrics. We don't make up our own. And that's how we grade our members. And then we sit down with their members and we talk about what's been going on in their system, what are reasons that maybe they're scoring low in certain areas and what they can do to improve that. So we issue those reports annually. We just issued it just recently here, so I don't want to throw any kind of curveballs at the city council or at Victor, but I would like, and I'm going to be talking to all of our members individually about their report card and make sure that they're aware of and understand the details that went into it. So I think that's it, other than this really cool graphic. And I only put that there to say, look, we are in an industry that is really not boring at all anymore. I think people kind of thought the utility industry was kind of a boring job. It's not boring. It's actually a really exciting industry to benefit. If you have any grandkids or kids, tell them to get in the energy business. It's a great industry, and we have a lot of challenges to face. So it's anything but boring, very challenging. And with that, we're asking our members, the smallest to the largest, to really be engaged in our business so we can together achieve success in this challenging business. So that's it. I raced through those slides in record time, which I've I can do it in 5 minutes or 2 minutes or 35 minutes.
Thanks a lot, Pat.
Yeah.
And, I think, council, if you have questions, that'd be great. I do have a question that I know the answer to that might be helpful to explain to the council, is that if we weren't part of the Michigan Public Power Agency, Michigan state law would require us to do these things on our own as a utility, correct?
Right, so there's a number of requirements that the state has. There's resource adequacy compliance. It means you have to demonstrate 4 years in the future that you have enough electric capacity to serve your peak load plus reserves 4 years from now. There's renewable energy compliance, there's energy waste reduction compliance. Those are just compliance activities that you would have to do on your own with your own staff. But beyond that, way more complicated than that is what we do every day. What we do every day is market operations. That's the bidding, scheduling, settling, forecasting electric loads, settling with the wholesale market. We get spreadsheets that are, I mean, they're so big now. I mean, I think we have millions of records we go through monthly in settlement data. So yeah, it truthfully, really small public power utilities and even bigger ones getting together. If you go to any, I think 85% of all the public power utilities in the United States are part of some kind of consortium. The only ones that aren't are like LA, Los Angeles, I think Seattle, San Antonio, and these are utilities that are the size of investor-owned utilities, and even some of those are actually part of the joint action. So yeah, it's really, really difficult to be able to perform all those tasks if you weren't part of a greater organization. Thanks.
How quickly is the industry evolving in terms of new technologies, like for storing renewable energies and such? I mean, is it, I've got to believe it's evolving quickly, or a lot of resources are put into that.
Yeah, no, I mean, it is an exciting space. There's a lot of money being put in R&D. There's new technologies almost, weekly we see in the industry. And so that's great. And technology will always be the solver of our problems. There's no doubt about it. The problem is pace, the pace of change versus technology adoption, and cost. And I think we're at a spot, I think over the next 5 to 7 years, this transition phase, we're the most vulnerable. The electric system is the most vulnerable. Because a lot of states were really aggressive. This is one of them, where we wanted to really kind of escalate or hit the accelerator with decarbonization. And that's all great. We all want cleaner sources of power supply, but the pace of that change really has to be measured so that you don't go too far, too fast. And then even those new technologies, they can't keep up. They still got to go through a beta change. They got to go through R&D process. They got, first movers don't want to get financing yet. So it takes time. You're probably reading more and more about nuclear energy again, and there's kind of a renaissance, or there appears to be a renaissance in the nuclear power business. That's very exciting. But again, these are technologies, we don't want to repeat the problems of the past. So these new technologies are going to take time. It's going to be in the 2030s before they really start becoming commercial. Yes.
I was just curious, since you mentioned nuclear energy, what's the timing of the power plant that went off?
Yeah.
Is now working on recommissioning?
Right. So it's called the Palisades Nuclear Plant.
Yes.
That's
Okay.
in this part of Michigan, sort of southwest Michigan. Yeah. So it retired a few years ago, and it's going through really the first of its kind. It's really trying to restart. The feds and state gave a lot of taxpayer money to do that, billions of dollars actually. And so I think their plan was to try to get it on in 25. I mean, I'm not inside there to know exactly what's happening. I would guess that's going to be a challenge. But yeah, I think they hope to bring it on sometime in the next few years. I think that's safe to say.
So, I mean, if you're saying they were saying 25, that sounds.
Yeah, right. Fall 25 is what they had originally. I mean, I think that's the only public thing I've seen, unless there's been something more recent.
Okay, so that's that's quicker than I was thinking.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I have my personal doubts that will happen, but I could be wrong, and it'd be great if it did.
Thank you.
Obviously, restarting a nuclear plant, scary stuff, right? I mean, safety has to be of the utmost concern, and so the Nuclear Regulatory Commission dictates when it's ready to be restarted.
Thank you.
What's ever involved with hydropower? Seems like there'd be some new technologies that could be more efficient
Yeah,
using hydropowers.
that's a good question. There hasn't been a lot of, well, certainly, you have run of the river and dammed hydro projects that make up the vast majority of what I'll call hydropower. There's also pump storage. Michigan actually has one of the largest pump storage facilities in the United States in Ludington. And there are new technologies in water, but there hasn't been, you run into a lot of challenges with new hydro projects because of environmental challenges. Every time you start dealing with tributaries and rivers, people go berserk, and it's really hard to do it. But like Michael asked, there's interesting technologies that are being worked on in the ocean. And I do expect it will achieve some economies of scale there at some point, but it's just, like I said, I think this next 5 to 7 years is the area of concern.
Yeah, 'cause I've seen some good work in wave.
Right, yes,
technology,
exactly
power,
right.
and the
Yep,
movement of water.
yep, that's exactly right.
Hopefully, some of the very things such as AI and,
Right,
which are.
the very consumers of electricity will figure out the new ways to make it.
Jump, they can.
Yeah,
do a
no,
payback and,
I fully expect that will be true. I mean, I think a lot of it, just like in medicine
there's a
and
bit
every
of,
other.
irony in that.
It
for
is.
sure.
Yeah, they're huge consumers of electricity, just unbelievable. But you're right, and they'll probably figure out how to do it more efficiently. I'm confident of that. Yes.
My guess is you're gonna put gas peaker plants in, is that the plan?
Yeah, I mean, right now, given that this legislation just passed in 23, we've been trying to tiptoe to that process pretty gingerly. One reason is that by 2035, gas resources, according to law, have to have a carbon capture system. And those are just absolutely uneconomic right now. So if I were to go to the bond market and try to get a finance plant like that, I just wouldn't get the.
So what do you think your baseline plan is?
Yeah, so the baseline plan is you gotta build gas and deal with the carbon capture later. Yeah. Yep.
How much more or less do we pay per kilowatt hour as a result of being part of the consortium?
That's a great question. I'll answer it this way, because I don't know Harbor Springs exact rates. But on average, public power utilities, their customers pay about 15% less on average than the investor-owned utility. So, also less than the electric co-ops as well. I don't have the exact math there. but-
I know our in city residential kilowatt hour rate is 10 cents, 0.01, so.
Yep.
Great Lakes Energy is probably about like 30, yeah.
That consumer's energy is 20 cents a kilowatt hour, so half.
We're a little bit less than Petoskey, we're quite a bit less than all our neighbors. So Harbor Springs has a real low rate.
Yeah, now, there are reasons why you do want to do rate increases, because it's not great to say, hey, I'm 30% lower than the next guy, because that probably means you're leaving money on the table to invest in your system. And to keep up with technology and your distribution system, you have to invest in. And so rate making and charging the right rate to ensure that you're properly investing in your system is very, very important. But yes, on average, public power utilities, 15% below investor owned.
Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. Yeah, if you don't mind, I'm gonna slip out of it.
Jamie or? What's the question?
Ready?
Always ready.
You want me up there or not?
You can.
Better up than you are, Jamie.
Yes, the second item on our agenda is the roof replacement for the Historical Society Museum. Just at the stage here, the Historical Society has been leasing Old City Hall since 2006. In 2024, I think in February or January of last year, we renewed that lease. And under that lease, the Historical Society is responsible for maintenance, and replacing the roof is considered maintenance. And it also requires city approval before they do it. Now, however, the Historical Society has been at council several times to talk about this, and in general, that the roof is gonna need replacements, but they finally have a final plan in place, so Kristen is here to talk to you about it.
Yes. Hi there, my name is Kristen Baylog. I'm the Executive Director of the Harbor Springs Area Historical Society. And this project was part of our $3 million capital campaign that we have been sailing through for 5 years now. Thanks to COVID, it's been extended longer than our 3-year campaign. But we do have the funding to do this. I'm joined by Jamie Martin, who has been a volunteer project director for the Shea House. And he's hopped across the street literally many times with me to bring this project to fruition also. So I provided in the packet here today just some history of the building for those who might not be aware. We are thrilled to be celebrating our 35th year as an organization here in Harbor Springs in March of 2025. And 17 of those years, we have found our home here in the City Hall building. We've been great stewards of the history of the building. And this year with this project, we just need to do some repairs. So I presented to you on page 2, a history of the building and what it looked like in its original state with a brightly painted red roof. And highlighted down just a little bit further is the red oak finished in hard oil. So the samples that I'm presenting to you tonight for approval take the facility back to its original state. Embarking on a little coloring project there. And we have received several bids, and the bid that we would like to move forward with is North Shore Exteriors out of Traverse City. And history is also exciting, like power, because they are interested in doing this project in February. So with your approval, we would sign such a contract and we would get this project moving forward, perhaps a little bit sooner than we expected. But they have an opening and their price is definitely in alignment with our budget. And I have done a mock-up here that shows you the red roof with a darker sided hard oil painted siding and some red trim work in the placement where now you see like an eggplant purple, and just done a little bit of mock-up for you. So if you'll slide just back a little bit, up a little bit, you'll see the shingle itself and a couple of the accent siding colors that we will be considering. However, please keep in mind that for this project, we're just here today to tackle the roofing project before we begin the siding. That would be at a later date in the springtime. So any questions? I've used the expertise of Jamie Martin, who has far more construction experience than we do at the Historical Society. But he is the one who's met with the vendors and the contractors to discuss, the actual steps of the project. And we also realize that our lease requires us to have insurance liability, and all those documents would be in place before we sign an agreement. Questions? Anything to offer?
No,
Did I miss anything?
folks apparently can knock this thing out for us in a week. So that was the biggest part of it. So when did you last re-roof the building?
In 2008 is when we opened, so in the project construction of 206 to 2008. So this would be our second.
15-year roof.
Yeah, we're hoping for an upgrade on that. We're hoping for a little more.
15?
He said
Oh,
15.
2008 to 2025,
Yeah,
that's about
17.
17. Well, the roof's been losing shingles, so
apparently didn't resheet or
They didn't,
make sure the shingles.
they shouldn't blow off the steep roof like they just.
Yeah, we have all new sheeting built into this quote.
They're not going over the over. No.
No, and in kind of researching back into notes, there were some concerns about the construction that was done, so. We have some things that we need to make sure are handled perhaps a little bit differently this time. We know more now, second time.
Then the other thing is these folks can do the siding for us. And that's important to me because I've seen so many projects where low bidder was taken and there was no interaction or coordination between the roofing and siding, you get flashing leaks and so on, so. These people can do it all when it comes time to do the siding.
Have they done historical? Other historical buildings such as these?
Yeah.
Actually, they have.
We've reviewed a portfolio of samples of their work prior to even actually getting a quote from them.
Kristen, question from the audience?
Yeah.
I love that you're going back to the original deep red. That's fantastic. Did you give any thought to using a metal roof, which will give you more longevity and could be still historically appropriate?
We didn't.
No, we didn't.
I mean, we did for a hot second to realize the obvious vast increase in expense. But we didn't, mostly from the sake of just the preservation closer to what it is now. I mean, obviously, the original roof would have been wood painted bright red. We did not consider that. And no, we didn't look at a metal roof. That would be something that I'd have to take to the board to see if they wanted to go that added expense. And that would
Probably give
be,
you twice the time,
yeah.
twice the longevity.
Yeah.
Any other questions?
Well, that's actually my concern is, it appears that we're choosing a roof based upon the color and not the longevity. I have a 40-year roof. And
Well, we have that available to us.
a 40-year roof in red,
We do, yeah.
and for this reason you chose
They
the
gave us a
25.
good, better, best, and I don't think we've made that final selection.
Yeah.
So,
So it's possible you might change to a longer longevity roof?
I think that's the way we're leading. Is it
We're
not?
at the best, aren't we? We picked the best of the good,
It's
better,
25
best.
years, according to what you gave us.
I think we are going with the upgrade. I'm not sure that information is correct. that you have.
Okay. And then my only other concern is it's an incredibly steep roof to be doing it in February when asphalt shingles aren't very pliable and I'm worried about the safety of the,
They're not, and you do risk blow off that time of year,
okay. So,
but it's a steep roof and it's fairly low. You know, protected on the bluff. So I like these guys. I like these guys a lot that we've selected. It's the most professional presentation I've ever seen with more information than I've ever seen presented. So.
And obviously, they've provided proof of insurance based on the concern.
Yeah.
Okay.
We would get you those documents before we have not signed an agreement with them. So once we sign an agreement with them, we would be able to provide the documents that are required in our lease with the city. So,
Okay.
I mean, the expense of a metal roof and a 40-year roof versus a 25-year roof is also a budgetary concern of ours. But, you know, we're here and now and we don't have the funding at this time to do something like that. I mean, that would be a decision that my board would make. We have built this into our campaign as a budgetary item, and we are within that budgetary amount with this contractor. A metal roof was not considered at the time of the capital campaign and the goals of the campaign. So I'm just not prepared to answer that.
so then the only question left standing is how what is the rating for this roof? If Jamie thinks it's longer than 25.
What's the rating for the roof?
You think it's longer than 25 years, Jamie?
The shingle that we picked.
The certainty was 25, but we were gonna go with the upgrade. So
So then the question remains is, what is that rating?
it's probably 40.
Okay.
I can't remember offhand.
Can you confirm that?
Oh, we can.
And if the city wants us to put a 40-year roof on, the city can also make up the difference to, you know, cover the cost of their building. So I mean, there's this kind of fine line of us doing what we can do at a time when the roof needs to be done. And so 25 to 40-year roof, taking the good, better, best, we did pick the best shingle. And we're grateful that it came in red because we picked the shingle before we picked the color. And I do have a sample of that, if that was something that you all wanted to see, but it's our home and we hope to be there into perpetuity for at least another 35 years. So you know, it's in our best interest to do what's best for the organization financially and for the security of the facility.
So you'll get a 36-year warranty then.
Yeah.
So we're walking out the door.
Victor, I don't recall, how long is our lease with the Historical Society?
Isn't there two extensions? So the term of lease, the term of lease is until December 31st, 2039. And then there's, I think, two opportunities to renew the lease. So the first one would be for 10 years and the second one would be for 10 years. So it would end up being a 35.
Potentially 35.
Yeah, 35-year lease.
Okay.
Potentially, but it's 15 years with the first
15, 10 and 10.
Yeah, 15, 10 and 10.
Okay.
You're calling this a repair? The IRS calls it roughly as a capital improvement.
I think I'm calling it repair based on what our lease says. Our lease says that in section 13 that tenant's obligation to maintain and repair premises, which includes the roofs, walls, ceilings, heating, and electrical. So basically our lease says that's their responsibility.
Fair enough.
A motion. You need a motion.
Yeah, if council wants to, a motion to approve or
Motion?
I'll make a motion to approve. I'm getting a new roof.
To approve what?
Historical Society getting a new roof.
I'll second.
Motion made and seconded. Any discussion?
Do we need to add to this that we want to hear back on with a little more definition on the, how long the roof is supposed to last?
Well, I think, I appreciate Wendy bringing that up. Thank you. That is I think, I'm a little confused. Jamie, you seem to think that, yes, we did go with the upgrade, but Kristen, you said the funding may not be there, so it would be nice to know, is it a 25-year warranty or a 40-year warranty or a 35-year warranty? In the packet, it's 25.
Yes, in the package is 25. So
Are we operating under the assumption that it is 25? And I understand there's some urgency here because they want to get it scheduled and, you know, do it in February, as do you guys.
25 is pretty standard, typical for roof shingles.
Kristen and
Around for 20 minutes.
And Jamie, would that be something that if we approve this and or consider it based on an assumption or that you'll get back to Victor tomorrow morning?
Well, I guess
Clarifies?
the question I think I would have, council, is would your decision change if it was a 25 versus 40-year roof? That if your decision would change, then you might want to look at it. But if you're fine with them doing a 25-year warranty roof, I think then we can get an update, a confirmation from them whether it's gonna be 25 or longer. But if you want a 40-year roof, understand that that's, from what I'm hearing from them, is gonna cost more money for them. That's what I understand, that a 40-year warranty roof will cost. So would you do this project without it being a 40-year warranty roof?
I think given that their lease is 35 years, kind of, I don't know that we want to give them to give it back at 35 years and have the roof need replaced in 5 years. Whereas if it's 25, they're gonna replace it in 25
Or 17.
or 17.
Maybe, yeah, so probably so. Well, I think it's good discussion, good points.
They're paying for it, I think, whatever they want, as far as I'm concerned.
It's 35 years.
35 years. It's a 35-year roof. I have it right here in front of me. We're paying $6,100 extra to get a 35-year roof.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Great.
Any more discussion?
You're like a roll call vote? Tom Graham,
Yes.
Kathy Macho,
Yes.
Michael Behrman,
Yes.
Wendy Reed,
Yes.
Jamie Melky.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Thank you. And I do have the shingle sample and the sidings in real life at the museum, if anybody is interested in seeing them. So thank you for your questions.
Thank you, guys.
All right, the next agenda item is Chief Knight will present the police department's 2024 annual report. Chief, take it away.
Thank you. This will be downloaded on our website as well. It should be on the city's website. I'm not gonna read it all. I'm gonna start with our first page at the very bottom of the first page. The first thing I want to say is I believe in the my 3 C's: commitment, compassion, and community oriented. That's what we all talk about at our department meetings. Every one of the officers that works with us, that's what we try to strive for. So that's the last page, and of course, I wrote in here, if we fail in any of these means in any of these areas, please let me know so that we can improve them. That's the first page. Staffing, we'll move on to the second page. This past year, we had an officer on every second of the year. I take pride in that. And we also went under budget in our overtime budget. So that's a compromise with the guys shifting their schedule, me covering some shifts. But I strive to do that when I came here. I promised it that we would have an officer on at all times, and we have. The next thing is our staff members, and that's our Officer Steele is here tonight. I'm really thrilled with the staff that we have. We got Josh here as our senior officer, and then we go down to Dan's the youngest guy of our crew, and then we have the 2 Marine Patrol officers. And Emily does an excellent job at our doing our administrative assistant. And I've spoken this before. Dan got married recently. Spencer just got married this summer. Spencer's having a child this year. Nick just had a baby a week ago. And it's like the kids are popping out like mad over there. And we've been in the daycare upstairs and maybe something. But I'm really tickled with our staff, and everybody believes in those my 3 C's, and they make that adjustment to be part of our culture that we'd like to have here at the police department. The workload under that, in 2024, we completed 364 reports, and that's in comparison to 953 in 2017. The significance of that, we try to balance the reports that we need compared to reports that are just like to fill paper. And my belief is if we minimize the amount of reports we do, if we need a report, we'll do it. But if we don't need one, that's more time we're patrolling the streets. And so I'm proud to say that we decreased that by over half, and that's made a difference, and you'll see later in the amount of miles that we patrolled. The last paragraph is the barometer I use to track sort of our activities, called the number of events by nature. And what that is this 911 hangups, assist citizens, extra patrol in the area, foot patrol, found property, intrusion alarms, basically anything that we self-generate into our computer or that we're dispatched to, and that includes medicals, and we respond to a lot of medicals. I'd say on an average, we respond to a medical, like somebody at Hillside or somebody at one of our residents, where the ambulance is called, we respond, we're almost always there before the ambulance, to get it set up. If the person needs aid, we'll render aid, but the ambulance shows up, we help them, we assist them. But those number of events by nature, that's our workload. And for 2024, we had 15,068 events, which is a ton of events. If you take that 365 days a year, how many that is per day? And that might be where we won't do foot patrol, where we go to the high school, we do a lockout, we take today I took a crash down here by Artesian in Pennsylvania. That's all those. Compared to in 2017, we started out with 4,441. So every year we try to increase that. It's basically these guys being accountable, logging in. They're not just sitting at the office watching the national championship game like we're going to do later tonight, but they're out and about. They're doing good things for everybody. The next page is our community oriented services. If you see our foot patrols in 2024, we had 1,121 foot patrols. That's where somebody's walking downtown or in one of the neighborhoods. Our property checks were at 5,565. Dan's attributed to that. He does a lot of property checks, but that's checking different areas of town. It's checking the high school. It's shaking doors at night. It's funny because I was talking to somebody who works at Ortho Sports, and she's like, "We get your business cards in here every now and then when we leave the door unlocked." Mr. Graham, I know we leave some business cards down to your place too.
Oh, yeah.
But we do that, and we do that to make sure that everything's secure at night. And then the last thing is public relations. We had 712 public relations. The next paragraph, it talks about how many miles we drove. Last year we drove 78,498 miles, and that coincides with our reports we do. Back in 2017, we drove 43,327 miles. So we've almost doubled that. Last year was a little bit lower than the year before, but our new hybrids, I'll say, definitely help us with gas mileage. We're putting a lot of miles on our car, but we also, with the going to the hybrid cars that we have now, we're saving it there. So now the important part is crime. I'm pleased to say that the numbers are pretty much significant, or they stayed the same over the last several years. The only thing that sort of upsets me, we had our first breaking and entering like the last 7 years. Last year, turkeys got broken into during the 4th of July. I was bummed about that. I like to have that, like call my chief friend and say, "Hey, we had no breaking and enterings," and it bummed me out. They laugh at me, but I take concern in that our retail frauds and our larcenies, they remain decreased a little bit, and our fraud has gone up, but that's just elderly people getting frauded, and it's so much easier now with computers for people to get. Most of those were computer crime. Actually, Dan did a phenomenal job in a fraud complaint early. Since he's here, I'll give him kudos. And we got a warrant for people, and it was a good work by a young man like him who just became a police officer not too long ago. Traffic, onto the next page. This last year, we made 910 traffic stops. Our verbal warnings increased from 475 a year ago to 684. That's over 200. Our traffic citations were consistent. It's that balance of education and enforcement. And we try to enforce if we need to, we try to educate if we need to. Our operating while impaired went up a little bit, and then our crashes, the next block down. We had 80 crashes last year. That was a little concern for me. They were up from 69 the year before. Some of that we can control, some we can't. Example today, down at the condos down here in Artesian, it's a traffic crash. One of the landscape companies was clearing a sidewalk, went to back out, he forgot a car was parked there. There's not much enforcement that we can do to prevent that. So, but it goes as a statistic. Parking, you look at our numbers, we were up from 339 last year to 441 this year. Our revenue for the parking, our tickets was $10,097, which is a significant amount of money. At least I feel like we bought that new automated system that has helped us, and somewhat is still very laborsome. But I'm hoping we'll have more compliance. By compliance, to say maybe a few more tickets, but get people to comply by our coming up next year. I'm talking fast just because I don't want to take a lot of time. Sorry. Non-criminal complaints, community service. It's pretty much, it explains it there, and you can all read it. You get online. The one thing I'll say is our lost and founds were up from a year ago at 40. We had 73 lost and founds. That's where somebody finds a wallet, finds a cell phone or something like that. And I've explained this before, but the thing that I take pride, if we find a cell phone example downtown, most agencies would take that cell phone, they put it in a bag and they put it in their evidence room. And what we do, I feel, is everybody does it above and beyond. We'll take that cell phone, we'll call 911. And we'll find out who the owner, what that number is, what number called 911. We'll take that number and we have a search engine called TLO where, and everybody does it, where they'll take that number, they'll plug it in and we can see who the owner of that phone is. But it does us no good because we have the phone. But the important thing we do that goes above and beyond is we look for, there's the next of kin, or you figure it out. Like, let's say it's Victor and he's age 38, and we'll look for somebody that's related to him in that same ballpark, assume that it's their spouse, and we'll call that number. And a lot of times when we call that number, they'll say, yeah, that's my husband's phone, or that's my wife's phone. And that's what we do for found property. Wallets, the same thing. If we find a wallet, everybody's on board, we bust our butt, because we always feel like if it was my wallet, we feel the same way. Or if it was my phone, I'd want that phone back. And so why we have that many lost and founds, I mean, we returned a lot of property. So, and it's just the efforts of the guys. Move on to training. The only thing I'm going to highlight, MCO's Michigan Commission on Law Enforcement Standards, they've upped the ante and what we have to train in. And then over the next 5 years, it's going to continue to rise. The one thing that we're going to do is we can do a lot of that virtually online. We're going to subscribe to a thing called Police One, where we can actually go online, not have to send officers to Lansing or wherever to get that training. We can do that online. That's number one. And number two is Kirkland's got a consortium that we're going to join. It's mostly upper this part of Michigan, and we're going to join that, and they're going to provide a lot of training as well, and that will be cost effective. The Marine Patrol, I'm just going to say, I'll touch on that maybe at the Harbor Commission meeting, but we had 90 shifts for 441 hours in 2024. Boat crashes decreased last year, which I was happy because the year before we had quite a few of them. And this last year we did a lot of stranded boaters. We assisted a lot of boaters pulling in. So that's Larry and Dean up there almost every day of the week. So on the last page here, our accomplishment for 2024 is I showed you the plaque. We completed our on-site review for the CLIA, which is Commission on Law Enforcement Accreditation. And I was very, very proud. That's a lot of work. I talked about it at a previous meeting. We had a malicious destruction of property, which we also talked about, where they egged, and we solved that crime. Investigated fraud claims, Dan did a phenomenal job on that. We purchased our new firearms at the aid of some donors, and we now have the state-of-the-art firearms. We were the first one in this area. The Toski's going to them, the county's going to them. We were ahead of the curve a little bit on that. I was proud to say that. And then we just purchased some new computers. Our computers in our office were 15 years old. They were ancient, and we've had all kinds of problems with your generosity. We just got them installed last week, the final batch of them. So we have 4 new computers with screens and that aren't like 15 years old. And those are some of the accomplishments for last year. For this year, the one thing, they're all listed there. We're going to start, Michigan has an accreditation process of their own. It's called MLEAC, Michigan Law Enforcement Accreditation. So we're going to join that. We're going to get out of CLIA. CLIA is very, like, I guess, it's nationwide, but it's very costly. For example, Tyler Hoff and I had to go to Florida to get accredited, and it cost us basically $4,000 to go to Florida to get accredited. The Michigan one is going to be much less expensive, and that $4,000 will cover us for a year, let alone what we have to pay annually for that CLIA standard. So I think it'll be the better way to go. Plus, I mean, we've had some good assessors here from out of state, but we've also had some assessors here. We had one from the Boston area that didn't believe that we only had 2 arrests in a year. And he basically was calling us a liar. And I had to call our regional guy to say, he knows Harbor Springs, this guy doesn't. By joining the Michigan one, all of our assessors will be from Michigan. They know what Harbor Springs, actually they are jealous because I work here, so, but they know that. So, so that's one of the highlights that we're going to look for next year. I'm down here, I put increased compliance with voter laws. I feel like we've talked about a little bit with some of the Harbor Commission members. We might have to take a little more aggressive stance out there sometimes because it's getting busier. And I don't think always, I don't want a lot of tickets, but also stopping people on the wrist all the time doesn't necessarily gain their compliance. So it's something we might look for next year. We have more kayakers, we have more people using the water besides just boats. We need to protect everybody. And then the last thing is we want to continue to respond to all calls for service in person. and create a relationship with our community. And the one thing I'm proud of is we get a call, we respond. Medical calls were there. Any call, we respond in person. If somebody wants to call, we'll call them back. But not always to do that. More and more are getting back to the sitting officer calling people. That's why you all pay taxes to have a police department for a population of 1,100 people. Not everybody has that. We're blessed to have that here. The guys I feel are all well compensated. We appreciate that. Retention in law enforcement is any job. But if you go to any conference, retention in law enforcement is a huge battle right now. Any agency, they're all understaffed. They can't keep people. I'm so lucky here because we've hired a bunch of new people. Everybody's here. I always, and Dan will say this, I always encourage people, if you want to go somewhere, I'm not going to hold you back. I'm not going to hold a grudge. Nobody ever held a grudge for me for like leaving St. John's to come up here. They were happy for me. And that's how I feel. But in the same sense with the pay they're getting, with how Victor and his staff treats them is phenomenal. And I'm just proud of our staff, but I'm proud of the fact that I put in here the support we get from all of you. So that wraps that up. So sorry, I'm talking real fast, but any questions? Anybody?
MDOP under crimes is minor in possession.
MDOP is malicious destruction of property,
And what's BCSA?
violation of controlled substance acts. So that'd be a drug crime. And we had one, and it was school related. Basically, it was like a vape in the school could be a BCSA. And the MDOPs is like, one was the egginess that we had where they hit all the cars. We had a car keyed, I believe, this last year. The one thing that I thought, there's a weapon offense on there. We did have a gentleman who had a rifle and a handgun. He was holding his partner at bay with us. And so that we charged him with, he was intoxicated, so we charged him with intoxicated possession of a firearm.
Under parking tickets, you say parking on the grass is miscellaneous.
So what we did is under our new system, parking in the grass, it used to be, it was on our old orange ticket set, we still have some, but under the automated system, that's not a checkbox. So from here on out, that goes up into the miscellaneous, which is third from the top, that's 69. That now includes that parking on the grass. But it used to be on our orange tickets, but we don't write a whole lot of those, and it was one of those categories that we didn't want to include. Basically, it's either at Zorn Park, at Ford Park, or it's over here for football games. So, thank you for the question. Any more?
Can
Good.
you say how many boat crashes?
How many boat crashes? I think last year we just had one. Yeah, the year before, I believe we had 5, couple serious ones.
I just want to confirm that he's come in multiple times to ask me if I knew people that lost phones and tried to help get it back. So I think you guys do a great job.
Thank you. No, it's one of our, like I said, most departments, I've been to other departments, put it in the bag, put it in the evidence room, that's their problem. That's not the way we do business. And correctly, we work our butts off to get this, because I know how I feel when I lose my phone, even if I think I left it at McDonald's or something, it's like I'm trucking back there to get that thing, because that's what we do. Thank you. So, yes.
First of all, thank you, Chief Count, for all you and your team do. It's very much appreciated. Just a question out of curiosity, you physically respond to every 911 hang up?
Oh, yes. Unless we get called off, and even if we get called off, probably 90% of the time, we still go and knock on the door just to make sure they're okay. Like if we'll get dispatched to a medical or even like a fire alarm, for example, a lot of times, like they'll call us off because the alarm company calls back. But probably 80% of the time, I'd like us to still go knock on the door, say, is everything okay? Thank you. And if it's ironically enough, if there's a fire alarm at like between 8 and 10 in the morning, it's vacant. I'll guarantee you somebody over there. It's the craziest statistic, but I'll guarantee you that. But thank you. Good. Sorry about that, but that's way about one. I get out of here. So, but thanks again for everybody's support. I know we are blessed to have a police department in a city of our size. I take pride in the fact that these guys work hard to maintain, make sure everything's done right. And I got a couple more years to go. So thank you.
Yeah, the next item is the Parks Department annual report, and also then following that, we'll have a discussion on fundraising priorities for our capital improvement projects related to parks.
Welcome, as Victor said, I'm Rachel Roon, I'm your Parks and Recreation Director. Usually I would do this with our park board chair, Deanna Mulder, but I'm gonna go solo tonight. But we did create this together, staff and the Parks Board together. So, advancements in 2024, I apologize, I read off the screen. We completed the Zorn Beach Playground installation and landscaping. We completed the skate park irrigation and landscaping. The actual concrete skate park was put in fall 2023. And then we did the landscaping, irrigation, everything this past spring. We received a $500,000 donation for improvements to Kiwanis Park. So that will be coming soon in the next couple of years, that project. We began a disc golf hole sponsorship program. Right now we sit about $5,000, maybe a little over, to bring new signage and some additional tee pads to the back 9 of the course. And we completed a survey to help establish patron wants in parks and where our patrons come from. 2024 continued. We created the Shea Park Master Plan. We brought that to council a few months ago to serve as a platform for spring 2025 improvements and the locomotive installation from the Historical Society. We held swimming and s'mores at Zorn Beach. That was a new program that we brought. We hired a full-time year-round Parks and Rec maintenance position. His name is Nathan Sterling. He is a Harbor Springs resident. If you haven't seen him, he's from Canada. He's amazing. We brought recycling to all of our major parks, and that was part of a Petoskey Harbor Springs Area Community Foundation grant. So that was a $9,000 project, but $4,500 of that, the grant, so half of it. We updated Quetzalcoatl Playground with wood chips and the used beach equipment, and we continued our annual events such as Fall Fest, Easter egg hunt. 2025 park projects. So looking for this year, we look for the spring to implement the Shea Park Master Plan Phase 1. We're also going to be looking at Harborview Park. That is the green space that is next to the pickleball courts and the skate park. A lot of you may know that as the Hoffman property. We're going to investigate funding options for the department's future, approve and bid out Kiwanis Park building improvements. With that disc golf sponsorship, we will do improvements this spring and determine future path for East Arm of Boardwalk and discussion on Zorn City Beach building improvements and what we plan to do there in the next few years. 2025 park programs and events. I'm not going to hit on all of these, but I am going to hit on the new ones that we plan on doing. Fall Fest for 2025, we are hoping to work with the DDA and the sponsorships for bringing another activity to the event. Sledding and s'mores, in lack of weather, we've decided to do a movie night or some sort of activity, so we're not canceling the event. Instead, we have a plan B. We're gonna do a dino dig for 2025 for younger kids. We're gonna implement a walking club, which is an 8-week program. And then new pickleball clinics, and a youth clinic specifically, and then a pickleball open house to hopefully get pickleballers together to congregate and play. Our guiding principles, we go through this in every presentation, but to hit on some big ones, keep it simple, less developed is often better, quality over quantity, taking care of the things we have before we move on to new projects, highlight surrounding recreation opportunities and amenities. We don't need to check off every box, but the surrounding area does check off a lot of boxes. We want to make sure people know where to go. Consider all alternatives, pros and cons on new projects. And residents want to know what Parks is doing and want a voice. So why are parks important? We also hit on this on all of our yearly reports. I'll hit on a couple of them. Home values are higher near green spaces. Cities and neighborhoods with parks are more desirable places to both live and work. Makes sense why we all love Harbor Springs. Parks provide gathering spaces for families and social groups, as well as for individuals of all ages and economic status.
Yep.
That's it. Any questions on the report itself? I do want to touch that we had our first sledding and s'more event last weekend, and we had about 150 to 200 people. It was popping. Our next one is January 25th, 4 to 6 p.m.
Okay, if there are no questions, I think we can move on to the discussion on fundraising priorities. And so this was brought up, Director Rune had asked council in the winter late last year, 2024, to for guidance on what council's priorities are for fundraising for certain projects. Specifically, the question asked was about the boardwalk, the Eastern Boardwalk. We are essentially passively fundraising for that. There's a link on our website, as well as for the Harborview, sorry, not for the Harborview, for the bike path. So what we want to see is a large, I guess, a recommendation from council on which projects are priorities and which projects are priorities for fundraising. There's a lot of projects the parks have planned out, and most of them are either going to be funded through grants and or fundraising. But there's differences in opinion on, which projects should take precedent. And in order there, you see the Parks Board recommendations on what projects in their view should take precedent. And you start with the Zorn Beach restrooms as the most urgent, they believe, and then bike path is least important. But what we need to know is, how much time and effort should we be spending on fundraising for which projects? At one point, council, the boardwalk has been a 10-year, probably, I'll say saga, but it started out in 2014, 15, planning to replace the boardwalk. 2018, we had some final plans. Then came down to 2021, 2022. We ended up only doing the western half and said we would fundraise for the eastern half. And then there's kind of there was different opinions at council table on how important funding the eastern half was based on the fact that the western half. So now, boardwalk is out there, we're fundraising for it. We want to know, how high the priority is that for council for us to fund that. And if not, what do we do? And same thing with some of the other projects. I think it's a good time of discussion and get some guidance from council, and then we can run with what you want. Council can propose the budget and set the priority for projects. Staff can go get done what you guys want to get done with the advice of the park board as well.
I'd like to see it completed.
The Eastern Boardwalk?
Yes. And it gets you, we all think we're the greatest, most wonderful, richest country in the world, but we can't afford to replace the stuff our forefathers built. As bridges and et cetera, all of the old country. We tell ourselves how good we are, but we can't afford everything our forefathers did.
I guess I'm looking at the order that you have there as far as you've ranked these, the funding for these, right, from most to least important.
So what we do every year as a Parks Board is we have a project matrix, and this year we included the CIPs. And then I go member for member and they rank each project 1 through 3, 1 being the most important, 3 being the least important, years off, we'll get to it. And this is a majority vote average of those. So they weren't by price necessarily, but by how they gauge the importance and how they prioritize.
But is the timing of the CIP in the same,
No.
these items are on the CIP in line with this?
No, that would not be the time.
I was thinking the boardwalk was fairly.
Correct. The boardwalk was a CIP before the Parks Board was created.
Okay.
So the boardwalk council years ago asked parks to fundraise for the boardwalk. So we never really ranked it before, because it wasn't necessarily a parks capital improvement project.
Oh, okay.
If that helps.
I'm just pulling up the CIP if you need a reference.
Okay, what's in there for 2025 that's parks related?
Some Shay, was that correct?
Yeah, Shay's on there, Kiwanis Park upgrades, I believe boardwalk's 2026.
Yep.
Yeah.
The boardwalk will be 2026.
So really what we're asking is those are quite a bit of projects for 2025 and 2026. Kiwanis, obviously we have a donation that's going to move forward. But when it comes to the boardwalk and some other projects, we just want to make sure our fundraising and our grant writing aligns with what council would like to see. Because obviously we have to time those things out and based off of.
My concern regarding the boardwalk is just that it's been something that's been kicked around and maybe put off. I'm not picking on you or anything. I'm just saying it seems like it's like, yes, we want to do it, but not right now. And so I'm just concerned about the priority on there as far as fundraising. When the old boardwalk is sitting there falling apart, I assume it's becoming more and more of an attractive nuisance, potentially a bigger liability problem. So
I think I would like to see plans for the boardwalk before I would like to see plans for other parks that don't have failing infrastructure. I think that to continue to plan 8 projects gets a little chaotic, and I think that picking one project that we aren't currently working on to that works for a DNR grant, because I know that that process takes a really long time from start to application to finish. So I think my priority would be to see plans for the boardwalk and then pick one other project. And again, maybe focus on what we have already and make our infrastructure better before we add new.
If I may, Dana Mulder, Parks Board. I just wonder, we're considering the boardwalk as a park, but it's not really a park. It's kind of park related, I guess, if you consider it a trail, something like that. So it feels kind of awkward to have that put at the top of our list when it isn't even a park.
I think council in the past has decided that it is part of parks.
I think when council look at it in the past, it was kind of like a hybrid. It's both used as a recreational means, so people walk on it for leisure and recreation, but it's also used as a sidewalk. So it can be considered both as a means of transportation, pedestrian transportation, to get from above the bluff to below the bluff, but it's also, for many people, it's a leisure. They don't have to take the boardwalk, especially the eastern half, now that the western half is there, but, so it's both. So we look at it a hybrid point of view. So the council did pass a few years ago when we did fundraising for the western half for parks and park staff to kind of lead that effort to get the fundraising for the western half of the boardwalk.
What's the status of fundraising for the east side?
400,000, but there is,
How much have we had so far?
oh, right now we have
4,000?
correct.
And there's a $25,000 match that still hasn't been met.
If I may again, we had also spoken to council previously about maybe using the services of a consultant who specializes in fundraising and grant writing to help us with a project. This could possibly be a really good one, to sort of get our feet wet and know exactly what we're doing, and then also help us get systems in place so that on future ones, we'll be ready to do it ourselves. So that's something that council could help us with if we decide the boardwalk's big priority is perhaps to fund that. I think, Rachel, do you remember, was it like $2,000, something like that?
They do different packages. It depends on what we want them to do.
Yeah.
They can be enormous packages where they do an enormous amount of work, and it can be, they're consulting with us and pointing us in the right direction. It's like, I can't give an exact price point what it would be. But fundraising for the boardwalk and the wheelway at the same time, we're looking at over $1 million. Well over. And that price point that we have for the eastern section of the boardwalk is old. It's an old estimate, so we would need to start by getting a current estimate.
But, and the other part of this is, have we, as council or anybody, come to any decision as to how we are gonna rebuild this? Does it need to be the same? I mean, I think there's a lot of issues on that, aren't there? That we need to really look at before we could even put a dollar amount.
So we have engineered plans from 2018, but when we did the western half was done slightly different than in 2022 than the engineered plans, but those wouldn't be too difficult because the section from the eastern half is a little easier to do from the material, but it's the access. It's the access to be able to get the materials in and out of there is the hard part of that.
I guess that's why I was questioning, is there another way to do it without so much material that it's more of a path and less of a staircase? I don't know. I mean, have we actually ever looked at a whole different approach?
No.
I think that's why I think a plan. And then we can decide if it's even a project we want to do, but we can't decide if it's a project we want to do if we don't have a plan.
I'm confused by plan,
I mean, you
not
draw a
big
plan
enough.
for every part.
So if it's I think this is a reverse order. I honestly think
Yeah.
we should decide if we want to do the boardwalk, Eastern Boardwalk, and then we should spend the money on creating plans that you want to see. I think that'd be the
I
appropriate.
mean, I think a hand-drawn plan is, I think before we go to engineering, we should decide if we want it, but I think exploring if there are other options is worth talking about before we
We do have.
Get rid of it.
engineering drawing.
Yeah. We do have the engineer drawing.
But we don't have options, like, are there other options?
An engineer would probably be the only one.
Yeah, so I think what Councilmember Milk is saying is that instead of just a wooden path, is that what you're saying, that be different? Instead of just replacing what's exactly there as
Yeah.
it is?
Yeah.
All right, yeah, we don't have that. We don't have any other option than what we have presented
We
before.
do have engineered drawings, when we
Right.
did the initial proposals for replacing the boardwalk, we had plans drawn for replacing it in wood or metal or doing it as a originally council 10 years ago or whenever that was, had approved to do it in a walk path. Which was there. So we do have most of that work already done. There would be some tweaks either way, whether it was to go back wooden like the western, or if it was a combination with like a walking path that then went up into the wooden section. But we do, for the most part, have 90+% of all that engineering already done.
All right, I didn't realize we had a walking path, so.
Yeah, it was the concrete option, Luca.
Yes.
Very disruptive to
I just had a question and understand what kind of traffic we feel that is really utilizing separate paths down, two separate boardwalks. But you do have the hill with a sidewalk at the eastern end of the bluff. So, that's obviously a good form of transportation to get from the top of the bluff to the lower part of the bluff that's already in place. And remind me where the eastern one actually is and lets out.
Gardner Street. In the district.
Okay, so and the western one is just a block or two west of there, right? Right.
Yeah, Spring Street.
Right.
Block.
This comes on. So, at the end of the day, do we need 3 different routes to walk down the bluff? Is there that much traffic on those boardwalks to justify that kind of expense? When there's already a pathway already in place?
Want to restrict public comment until council is done
I think the council should decide what they're wanting to do
first, and I'm happy to have it, but I'd like to keep us on task with the council part first. Thank you.
Thank you, David.
So if I had heard it correctly, if we don't do something on the eastern portion of the boardwalk within the next year and a half, we will lose the easements for those properties?
I don't think anyone said that. Jim, you could probably speak to that, but I don't think we would lose the easement next year and a half. There has been a concern that if we let it go for many years, we don't know what the number of years is, there's a potential that there could be some consequence there, but we don't have a set time frame yet. But Jim, you might know better.
Well, I think it's a question of waiver, and I don't think we're there yet, but I think it's I think if you're going to preserve that easement, you do need to improve it and make it usable. So that's your decision tonight. Is this something that's important to you as a council? If it is, you should move forward on it.
So I ended up ranking the Kiwanis building, number one, because you have a $500,000 grant, and if you don't spend it by next year, the end of next year, you lose it.
Correct, and we're actively working on that, so that,
So for that amount of money, it has to go first on the list.
correct.
And I placed the Eastern Boardwalk second because it's a project that's dying on the vine because nobody's pursuing it. So they get old and tired and everyone gets tired of looking at it. So we need to decide if we're going to do it or not. And then third, I put the Zorn Beach restroom update, and fourth, the Shea Park Phase 1.
I'm sorry, which one did you say for?
The Shea Park.
Thanks.
And last now for me is the bike path, because I really don't want to spend that amount of money to move a bike 6 blocks.
Mayor, you're making a motion regarding the boardwalk?
We need a motion or just consensus?
Well, I think it's important to do something with the boardwalk. It's part of our historic charm in the city, and I would hate to see that abandoned. So I think we need to move on that. It sounds like the Zorn Beach restrooms are pretty close to being in that failing sort of mode or getting there. And is that
Anyone that's used them.
correct?
agree with
Yeah,
that.
I would.
Okay.
And Kiwanis is gonna happen. I mean,
Correct.
that's just gonna happen. So, and you put a lot of time and effort into Shade Park. So I can see that one too. I think Wendy's top 4, if you will, makes sense to me. Obviously, one's a very huge project. And I think we do need to look at, I know that, I remember, the debate about going with a concrete and so forth, and, you know, that really got into people's, you know, that didn't last too long. There wasn't, I just remember there wasn't a lot of, that wasn't a favorite method, so, you know, but things change. So, but I like the top 4 that Wendy suggested.
So would council like to see those options that Lucas had mentioned that we have plans for and cost estimates for those? I think that would be the next approach, if there's consensus to go forward on the board.
For the boardwalk.
Yeah, yeah. And then at that point, we can get some rough cost estimates and then decide funding plan, funding. I know we've looked at the grants before and figured out that DNR grants aren't a good fit for the bike path. They're better for other projects. So the boardwalk would likely have to be fundraised. We also are, as a reminder, we are putting money away in our reserves for this purpose in the future, you know, $50,000, $100,000 a year. So when to fix our failing infrastructure, so we can focus fundraising and grants on other stuff. You know, our basic infrastructure, we want to have money in reserve. So we're trying to be proactive with that in the future. Of course, we don't have the funds, and I'm not recommending we use those funds right now for this, but it's something to keep in mind that we are actively trying to do that.
As far as fundraising go, I know that there's been talk about hiring a consultant, but I would suggest, if anyone else is open to exploring a fundraising committee. I think we have a lot of people in our community that have done grant writing and fundraising. And I think that getting a group of people from our community together to just brainstorm different ways of fundraising and have them present to us a fundraising plan or fundraising options, and then we can then decide which ones we could execute for which project.
And this wouldn't be a Parks fundraising committee, would be from city council.
Correct.
Because there's, I think that'd be good because we also have projects and other,
I think any department could use.
yeah.
There's a lot of expertise in our community, that's for sure.
Just related, regarding the Shea Park plan, what's the current commitment from the Historical Society and when the locomotive is gonna be here? Do you know?
Spring.
But
They don't-
that's
I
a
don't-
little, oh, okay,
I don't-
nothing more
apologize.
specific than
Yeah.
that, okay.
And have we, Rachel, have we heard back on whether or not there'll be any donation from? Okay.
Regarding that train, is this interactive? The kids can climb all over it and actually,
No, so, as far as I'm aware, it'll be the locomotive and then I'm sure a buffer, it'll actually be on tracks. And then some sort of buffer and then a, concrete pad surrounding it, then a pavilion over it.
so you march your little kid down there and say, admire the train, but you can't get on.
Very similar to the AHA, I don't see people climbing the AHA very much.
Yeah, so that makes it less than attractive.
Would it be I think it would be a good idea to get a report from the Historical Society soon.
A report.
From them regarding the plans for the locomotive and to answer some of these questions. Because if I recall from when it was discussed last year, by the Historical Society, they first weren't gonna put the roof on it right away, and then they decided, yes, they wanted to put a roof on it right away. So it seems to me there's some moving
So that's what we
pieces
said,
here.
ideally, they'd like to put a roof on it, in a way to protect it, I think it was a funding, I think they were still currently fundraising.
Right, but I thought, I don't wanna get in the weeds, but I agree with Kathy, maybe an update from Kristen. I think the cab of it was gonna be wood, as I recall, but now it's metal. So it's not gonna be, whether the protective factor. I don't know, but I think it would be good to get an update.
Nate Graham, I'm on the Historical Society. We have gone back and forth. We're talking about two different tops, but yes, we are going back to the original, what was going to be originally on the train top. We can get you an update soon.
So Nate, would that be wood then?
So no, it's going back to metal.
Okay,
And then there will
okay.
be another
Gotcha.
metal top on that. We're talking about.
Other questions on the train?
Or the boardwalk?
By the boardwalk?
We do have a public comment on Zoom, hand up, Miranda Miller.
Hi, this is Miranda Miller, 651 Second Street. In regards to the east side of the boardwalk, it accesses one place at the top on Bluff. It cannot access, you can't get onto the boardwalk anywhere else because east of there is, that's private property. So basically for $500,000, you want to connect 5 houses in less than a city block at the bottom. Do you not find that kind of superfluous? I think if you want to raise $500,000 and you can do it, I would go ahead and do it, but do it for something else that's really needed. I'm on that boardwalk all the time and there is no need. I'm sorry, I'm getting a sore throat, so it's hard for me to talk, but I find it superfluous, the other side. And also, if you would replace it, you don't paint the front of your house one side red and the other side green. Make the whole thing flow together. It should kind of blend into the, to the landscaping up there. And also, I had another point I was going to make. As far as the easement and the rights there, it is my understanding, and I'll stand corrected, that it is indeed that if you do not build that east side of the boardwalk within a certain period of time, and I believe it's sooner than later, then that property, the rights to that property are returned to the property owners above and below the bluff, which would mean that the city would not have any jurisdiction over that part of the bluff. And as we recall before, trying to get a grant in Harbor Springs is difficult. We're a very wealthy community, and we got turned down for a $500 grant, I believe, before, to try to replace the boardwalk. Anyway, those are my thoughts on that. I think fiscally, I would rather see the $500,000 go towards something else and just keep the one side of the boardwalk and not just put it up there just because it's historical. Again, it's connecting a very short period of cement, amount of cement on 3rd Street. That's all I've got. Thank you.
I have another hand raised, Sarah's iPhone. If you could state your name and address.
Hi, this is Sarah McLean, 50 Washington Court. And my comment is regarding to Rachel and the Parks Department being responsible for fundraising for this project. If Rachel's spending her time doing that, she's not spending her time programming, working on other parks, doing more community-based activities. And noticing in the past that the community has not been very enthusiastic about donating to the eastern side, despite efforts that have been made. I'm just wondering if this is something that can be removed from Parks' responsibility, or moved to a different methods of fundraising. I love the idea of maybe a fundraising committee. But again, I'm just overall concerned about what we may be missing out on if our Parks Director is spending time on this project. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other thoughts from council?
I think if we're gonna continue talking about adding infrastructure, I think it would be good to give council a little bit of an idea of, if we add more infrastructure, is that gonna mean more staff? Is that gonna mean our parks are gonna cost a lot more to the city? How can we help fund the parks? We don't have a lot of revenue that comes in for the parks. Are there missed opportunities?
There are so many issues that come up with this. I'm having a
I
hard
just
time
think we need more information.
figuring out where to even start. Are we?
Make a donation.
Oh, well, I don't think my $100 is gonna go very
That's
far.
really good.
I guess I'm trying to understand, do we need to be prioritizing the fundraising, or do we need to be setting a priority for what infrastructure we do and then figure? I'm a little bit confused as to what you guys need from us.
There's two different perspectives there. On one hand, what you have in front of you is priorities given to you from the advice of the Parks Board, which is an advisory board. You also have the capital improvements plan, which lays out which projects are prioritized per year, right? And we have Kiwanis projects slated. So we have that up for 2025. For 2025, we have Shea Park, and we also have the Kiwanis Park upgrades, which may or may not be done Kiwanis Park, depending on when the packages, the bids are solicited and come back. It may start in 2025 or may start in spring of 2026. So, but those are the two projects, big park projects that are slated for 2025. And then in 2026, you have the boardwalk as a project. You also have bike path, which I don't think will get there if the Harbor Inc., who's doing, or Harbor Way is doing a lot of that fundraising for that. So
You also have the city beach restroom.
city beach restroom. So you have though the priority is prioritized that way in addition. So this is the capital improvements plan that council has adopted and approved as far as timeline for these projects. But you did get you get the information on prioritization. So what I think we're looking at here is, all right. I mean, the first initial request back in December to November was to look at the boardwalk. How important is it for us to fundraise for the boardwalk? Or to do the boardwalk project? And I think so far I've heard some consensus that you want to see something done there.
We have to either decide to move forward or decide to give it up.
Okay, so then we'll come back at potentially in a meeting in February with information as we agree to different plans and potential cost estimates. Then you can decide that question there. So is there, yeah, if you can tag on that.
In simplest terms, you can't fundraise for everything in a span of 3 years. It's not practical. We know that. Parks has done over $1 million worth of projects fundraising. And I think Nick and I did the math, and general fund has spent less than $200,000 on those projects. We've been very successful with help of the community. What Parks is saying is these are a lot of projects. We can't ask for that much funds from the public fundraising. That's going to be extremely difficult. How do we prioritize these? Are the beach restrooms what we want to focus on and fundraise for? Is the boardwalk? Is the wheelway? And where are we going with this? If you would like staff's opinion, beach restrooms are my largest headache and probably the biggest complaint we have when it comes to our infrastructure. So I think that's what we're looking for, is guidance in how we prioritize our fundraising efforts, knowing we can't do it all in that time.
And you may want to think of something like bathrooms as tapping into general fund reserves, because those are, or even waterfront, those are reserves that we meant to have to maintain infrastructure that we have. So it's a large project. I'm not saying it could be totally done with reserves and general fund, but that's the whole point of having reserves, is to maintain things like bathrooms and basic buildings, right? You know, something like the Kiwanis Park building, you have a donation for enhanced, it's being enhanced, right? It's not just being, you know, but public bathrooms are.
Yeah, I think it'd be hard to fundraise for a toilet.
Yeah.
And get their name on it,
You know.
Oh,
But
yeah.
it's infrastructure that presently exists that the city needs to shore up. So,
And some of these projects, we do have DNR grants in mind, so it wouldn't fully be fundraising for the general fund. We do have some specific projects that'd be great fits for DNR. Boardwalk simply does not fit.
I guess, to me, the biggest question, again, goes back to, do we want to move ahead with the boardwalk? Or not, because that's gonna have to be fundraising. Well, that's, if we do.
All right, so I think the next meeting we can decide, look at those options, and then we can decide from that point on how, if and how to go forward with the boardwalk. And that could help then Parks, what their projects on how they can focus efforts, and then we can talk about fundraising committee if it's necessary at that point.
I feel like the sooner if we want to form a fundraising committee, I think the sooner we get the word out there and form it, the better.
I like that idea. The committee.
Yeah.
Don't look outdoors, it's getting closer to summer.
I mean, yeah, I think it would be best to form it as soon as possible to get those ideas and get started on some of these fundraising projects. Like, I don't think it would be that hard to find donors to support the Shea Park plan. And then we could use the money that we had talked about for that for the bathrooms, which are going to be harder to fundraise.
So you're suggesting that we should, for the next council meeting, have a plan to start getting fundraising committee together? Okay. Is that a consensus?
Yes.
Yes.
I agree.
Yeah, that's the.
Are the bathrooms one of the options for the DNR grant?
Yes.
Oh, it is, okay.
Yep, the restrooms would be, they have really great grants for older buildings, so that would be a really great fit.
But did I understand you to say that that's a long time to get those grants?
Not necessarily, the passport grant
Okay.
takes about a year, that's a pretty quick one, and it doesn't necessarily mean we're gonna be tearing down buildings, building a new building, there's some basic plumbing things that really need to happen in that building, and Lucas and I will evaluate that with the company and see what the necessity is there. I don't think it has to be anything quite, plumbing obviously is expensive, so.
Okay.
Maybe all of us can take a in the next 2 weeks, take a walk over and it's kind of hard to look at the boardwalk. You're gonna have to stand on the finished end and look down at. Then if Lucas can get the plans out to all of us so we can start educating ourselves on a decision on that.
Right.
Good idea.
Yeah.
Anything else, Rachel?
I'm happy.
Good.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Council rules and order of amendment. Before we get into that discussion, I'd like to make a motion. We delay this discussion until a future meeting when we've got enough information on the subject. I don't think we have any current information on it. I've heard several different opinions on it.
Why did this end up on the agenda?
Did you want to second that?
Yes.
No, I'm wondering whose idea it was to put this on the
Well,
agenda.
we would need to second it before we really discuss it. Removing it.
No, I'm just wondering whose idea this was.
City man, this is my recommendation. Most of the city manager, most of the items you see on your council packet stem from the city manager's office. If not all. And I can get into the reason for that if you want, before you guys decide to whether or not to remove it. And it's because I get requests from council members to add items to the agenda, and there's no outline process on who approves the agenda in the charter or in our rules of order. And so if we're gonna add items to the agenda, remove items from the agenda, this is council's agenda. Council should have ownership, not me. So I'll put agenda together and then council should have the ability to approve whether or not they want that on the agenda or not. That's in line with Robert Rules of Orders. And I can go through that presentation. I can go through that information if you want it on the agenda. It takes 5 minutes to go through my memo.
Okay.
Not necessary now for me. Anybody have other thoughts?
Anyone want a second?
Yes, I'd like a second.
He'd like a second.
I'll second it.
Okay.
Motion made and seconded. Any discussion?
Go ahead.
Roll call.
Second on that. I think it's important to discuss. I've as a superintendent, assistant superintendent with a couple different school districts. It's very common especially in for local government entities, the first item on the agenda after a roll call is approval of the agenda. It's a very, very common process that probably most local government entities follow. Now, having said that, we don't operate in a strong mayor type of model. We all have an equal voice at the table, but having said that, I do believe that the city manager should work with the mayor, collaborate with the mayor on the agenda, before it comes to council. And obviously then council should have the ability to approve the agenda, amend it, add items, remove items. As Victor said, it's council's agenda, and there really hasn't been a clear process to this point. I've been on council now for almost a year and a half, and there's not a clear process. I do believe, though, that the city manager should engage in collaboration with the mayor to create the agenda.
I agree in terms of the collaboration. I'm trying to, excuse me a minute, I just have to think how I want to phrase this. but my concern about this was the timing. The agenda was created and is published. So once it's published and it's out to the public, I would question changing that agenda without a full council vote. And that's my concern, is once it's published, I like the idea of the collaboration between the mayor and the city manager to decide on an agenda that would then be published, would be public information. That way everybody has plenty of time to know about it.
Well, this is how it typically works. So I
Right.
typically email Mayor the agenda. And actually I discussed the agenda with Mayor Graham a week and a half ago. And this is how we've done it historically with Mayor Bagheera, and is, I believe, in the collaboration. So I do send out the agendas for input. I am all for having a clear process. That's why this is the whole point of this, is having a clear process.
Can we take a vote to decide and then
Yeah, what was the motion? The motion was to table it?
To remove it
from the agenda?
from this agenda.
Take it up to the future meeting when we've got a little more information.
So we have a motion on the table in a second.
Correct.
Roll call vote, Michael Behrman,
No.
Do you want to remove the item? That's the question.
right? Kathy Macho,
No.
Tom Graham,
Yes.
Jamie Melky,
No.
Wendy Reeves,
Yes.
motion fails.
I would just like to see the presentation, and if we decide we need more information after that, I think that would be appropriate to not make any movement on it.
All right. Just a quick few slides. So I am recommending council create an agenda item on future agendas for approval of the agenda. This formalizes an informal practice that we've had in the past, that we've utilized in the past. We've utilized it a few times in 2024, where at the beginning of the year, or in December 16th, when we decided to move the Harbor Commission, the appointments of boards and commission members to the first item in the agenda. Normally, in a normal setting, that would be under the approval agenda, you would rearrange the items of the agenda under that section, under the approval of the agenda. So the current practice is the city charter and the council's rules of order are silent on who sets the agenda and how. The practice has been the city manager sets the agenda, mayor provides input on the agenda items. This practice is not in question, it works well. It's worked well as long as I've been here. But there is no section on the agenda that allows council to approve the presented agenda. So the agenda is not supposed to be the city manager's agenda. In this capacity, I sort of act like the secretary by preparing the information that council sees before them. The ultimate authority resides in council to decide what they are going to discuss and approve at the council meeting. So while my duties include, for example, advising council and recommending policies and ordinances, and it has the same right to speak as council member according to charter, it's ultimately on council to have the explicit opportunity to add, remove, and reorder council agenda items. So Robert's Rules of Order, our council rules of order defer to Robert's Rules of Orders for procedural matters that are not denoted in the city's charter or council rules of order. So by default, we have to follow our rules of order, which defer to to Robert's Rules of Order. And according to Robert's Rules of Order, for a proposed agenda to become the official agenda for a meeting, it must be adopted by the assembly at the outset of the meeting. At the time that an agenda is presented for adoption, it is in order for any member to move to amend the proposed agenda by adding an item, removing an item, or proposing a change. That is Robert's Rules of Order. So that is what our council rule of order defer to. So our boards and commissions, so take a look at what they do. The DDA, the ZBA, and the Harbor Commission. The bylaws state that the secretary prepares the agenda, and the board shall approve the agenda at each meeting and may add to items from the agenda or rearrange the order of the items. The Planning Commission bylaws state that the secretary prepares the agenda, and the Planning Commission may add or delete items from the agenda or rearrange the agenda. For TAB and Parks, the agenda is prepared by the secretary. There is a conflicting section in both the Parks and Tree Board bylaws. we're under the agenda section. It says, it's prepared by the secretary, but under the duties of the secretary, the secretary works with the chair to, prepare the agenda. So for these boards, the bylaws govern. So for DDA, ZBA, HC, Harbor Commission, and Planning Commission, which have responsibilities that extend beyond advisory. For example, the DDA can spend money, the zoning board is quasi-judicial, the Harbor Commission and Planning Commission have rulemaking abilities. Those have their bylaws essentially say the secretary prepares and the board adopts that agenda. For the advisory boards, it's a little different. It's really up to to staff to prepare that agenda for the advisory board. So why do this? As I kind of explained, first, it gives council a clear and formal opportunity to amend the agenda. As I said, I've received questions and requests by council members to add items to the agenda. And the current practice is for a council member to bring that up under old new business, which is discussed at the end of the meeting. When you add approval of the agenda, it gives the council members an opportunity at the beginning of each meeting to add or remove the agenda, an item to the agenda. And most importantly, it ensures council has the ultimate and final control of the agenda. So we are a council manager form of government. While the city manager prepares agenda in order to fulfill my duties, the final control can rest with council. And right now it's just very ambiguous as to who the final control rests with. So I shouldn't be bringing agendas. And this is a hypothetical situation, but if I bring several agenda items, the council's like, why are we talking about this? Shouldn't be me saying, all right, well, we got to talk about it because I'm the city manager. It should be council saying, you know what, we want to or we don't want to talk about this item. So it clarifies the process and it ensures that the authority to approve agendas rests with city council. And we are a council manager form of government, and that's how it should. So that is my reasons. That's what I'm suggesting. So not really a change in practice, but formalizing what we should be doing based on Robert's Rules of Order.
So your thought process was to simply, to just add, maybe embellish on the current practice, not to change anything about in terms of the mayor and the council city manager getting together and discussing the agenda, because that
was not part of my recommendation.
Okay,
Yeah.
so in other words, that's satisfactory the way it's been done. Except that you believe that the council should add an extra layer of.
So I mean, it's not just what I believe. Our council rules of order refer to Robert's Rules of Orders.
Yes, and as I had mentioned before, most government entities follow Robert's Rules of Orders and do that. The adoption of the agenda is the first agenda item following pledge and roll.
Did you have something?
Well, I'm wondering if we were, since it is a slightly conflict of interest to have the city manager produce the agenda, what if the city clerk produces the agenda and he works with the mayor to do it? That removes that conflict of interest for the city manager.
With all due respect, I mean, help me understand why there's a conflict of interest.
Well, the agenda then is the one that's produced by what the manager wants us to talk about instead of what the mayor wants us to talk about.
We entrust the city manager with the day-to-day administrative functions of our city. We don't do that. We're not close enough to the daily functions of all the employees, what they do day in, day out, to know that. I don't see that as a conflict of interest. Certainly, when I was superintendent, I prepared the agendas for our Board of Education meetings, and the board president and I met and reviewed that, and very similar to what Victor does with the mayor. And I think that's what most entities do. He's our CEO of this organization. He should be making the agendas with input from the mayor. Excuse me, we were having a discussion first. amongst council. Thank you. Are we not having a discussion amongst council, then we can get public input?
I don't know, we're kind of all over the place.
Chapter 4 of the city charter, section 4.6. The relationship of council to the administrative division says the functions of the city government shall be divided into 2 general divisions, policy forming and administrative. Victor would be the administrative, we would be the policy forming. So that would follow that we would be producing the agenda.
But the charter also says that it's the city manager's function to recommend policy and ordinances as he deems best needed for this functional administration of the city. So that's also in the charter, and it's been standard practice for city managers here as well since we've had.
I called Tom Richards to ask him this question, and he said he did not produce the agenda.
I called the former mayors as well, and they said they worked closely with the city manager.
Tom Richards told me that he worked with the mayor to produce it, but the mayor produced it.
No.
I just talked to him before I walked in the building.
No.
And then he suggested I call Fred Gruder and ask him.
The city manager works with the mayor to put out the agenda.
I guess in deference to, in addition to that, however, a lot of the items that are on the agenda that need to be presented to the council are administrative items and those items are part of the city manager's purview. And that's where he's the one that knows that we need to get the report from the MPPA person. He's the one that knows we need to get a report from the police department or the parks department. The clerk doesn't necessarily knows those things. That's not part of his purview. So I guess that's where I'm coming from on this is there has to be an administrator that says, these are the items that council should see. These are the things that council legally has to see and to vote on. And then as a council, we can decide, are there other items we need to add? And I don't see a problem with that. And I think to me, we're just looking really at a different process. Instead of doing some of these new and old business things at the end, we could bring them up at the beginning and rearrange the agenda that way. That's.
I mean, I'm suggesting then that the items that the city manager wants to talk about, he would convey that to the mayor. And then the mayor would decide he's putting it on the agenda or not. So the mayor produces the agenda, not the city manager.
Well, I don't agree with that. I think there needs to be collaboration. But if, you know, I believe that when it comes to the day-to-day operations and the things that need to be discussed or voted on by the council, the city manager is the person that is hired by the city to make that judgment and to communicate and collaborate there.
But the mayor would, if we go back to the organizational chart, the mayor is the head. We fall under the mayor, Victor falls under us.
We're a council form of government and all council members are equal in this matter for.
This is not a strong mayor model. I totally, with all due respect, I disagree.
Then it would be the 5 of us who would be producing the agenda.
Well, that's why we would be adopting the agenda and have the ability to amend it. We don't have that now before the meeting starts, so.
So you would get to add things.
That's just the point that we're saying, so.
So you would get to add things to the agenda potentially if you wanted to at the beginning of the meeting, instead of now we wait till the end of the meeting and we say new and old business, and then usually that goes on the next agenda. But this method would allow you to make a motion to either add something or remove it. And then if you have the support, we would do it. So it actually does give us a little
I
bit
just
more.
see this as a curtailing of the mayor's power.
I think he's still planning on meeting with the mayor ahead of time.
So I've forwarded all my agendas to the mayor in advance and met with this current mayor to discuss about this agenda before it was issued. So I nowhere in my recommendation is it says that we would stop that process. That was not the point of this. The point of this was to outline a process for formally adopting the agenda. So it's not just my agenda. It's going to, or with collaboration with the mayor, it needs to be the council's agenda. It clears up the process. It's in my mind, it's really pretty simple. It's a procedural thing. It's not a substance thing.
So in other words, what you're saying is if there was an item that I thought should be on the agenda, if we change this at the beginning of the meeting, I could say, I could make a motion to add something to the agenda. If there was no second, then it would not be added to the agenda because I didn't have support, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
And it's also in line with Robert's Rules of Orders, which the secretary provides the agenda and with input and collaboration with the chair or the presiding officer of the board. That's what our rules refer to. So I think we're overcomplicating this, but
I think so too.
Jim, do you have anything to add?
Do I have anything to add? I don't disagree with what Michael has said. I think he's said it well. I think it's, I think that the current practice of the city manager who understands what the issues are in meeting with the mayor to develop an agenda, they collaborate, they work together, they decide what the agenda is going to be. If the mayor says that shouldn't be on there, and it's not going to be on there. And that then comes to the agenda, then comes to the council, and they consider it. My only thought is that the current practice, I mean, having someone make a motion at the beginning of a meeting to add something to the agenda that evening is not workable. I mean, if it's an item that's controversial, you can't deal with it. You need time to think about it, which is why the current practice of at the end of the meeting saying what new or old business is there? Do you have something to bring forward? That's practical. That's a practical solution. I don't have a problem with adopting this approach. I think this is probably consistent with Robert's Rules of Order. Probably should be done. That's my. You don't have a problem with changing it right before the meeting? That's and things quite right.
well,
The only thing I don't like is having someone introduce a brand new topic that evening. And you're saying you can do that, right? Well, you right now you could do it. You can do it. Yes. Proposal he has. We'll bring it up at the start of the meeting if that's what happens, and you can change it right then and there, right? If you make a motion, I second it, and it becomes an agenda item.
Well, it has to be voted on
It has to be
after
voted on.
it's seconded, right?
Yeah, you could do that. Maybe there's an emergency issue. I mean, you know.
There might be an emergency. Okay,
Yeah.
so you're suggesting that you'd like the current new and old business is a good place to bring up things that may be substantive and need some thought and some study.
Should be put on the agenda for the next meeting.
Okay.
But still having the ability to amend the agenda, to add something to it that evening to deal with an emergency situation or something that's very controversial and needs resolution. I don't see a problem with doing it this way.
Thanks.
Thanks, Jim.
Move on to the.
Public
Public comment.
maybe public comment.
Do you want to-
Carter, you had a comment?
Carter Williams, 355 East Bay. You are the legislative body. It's not like the school board. It's not like something else. You are the legislative body. You have to set your agenda. There is a strong executive concept in our bylaws that says the mayor is the executive. The Municipal League of Michigan says the right way to do this is agendas are discussed ahead of time through the recorder. The recorder gathers that information as an independent person, presents it to the mayor. They can come from all the different other members. The mayor adjudicates what it is, and then he says what the agenda is. 18 hours, whatever the 24-hour period is ahead of time, so everybody who comes there that night knows what the issue is. If there's an emergency issue, OMA has provisions to deal with that. But you are the legislative body, he's the executive body. It's almost like saying Trump should set the legislative body rules inside the legislature. It's not done. That's not the way it's done. And that's not what our bylaws say. And the municipal league characterizes how it should be done. The reason why it's not written down is because that's the way it's done. It's like common law. So I would encourage you to gather those things up, get all of your opinions in, have it go to Tom to adjudicate it at the end, come into the meeting, and if you need to add something to meet an emergency, add it in an emergency.
I want to clarify that's not how our government works based on our charter or our bylaws. We are council manager form of government. And our charter clarifies the process for that. So
I don't know if I'm competing with you on this, but this is an issue for them to decide. And if you want to make that point, point it out legally.
I'm making that point right now, Carter. Thanks for your comment. But we are a council manager form of government with an equal say from all council members. And I think the process is pretty clear in our rules of order and charter and Robert's rules of order. So you can cite Michigan Municipal League, but the Michigan Municipal League's general information on how this works does not supersede our charter and our rules of order.
Yes, Chip Everett, 4 Beach Drive. One point of clarification. Jim mentioned that if the city manager and the mayor get together and they collaborate, and that the mayor does not want something on the agenda, then it won't be on the agenda. Is that the case, or does the city manager have the final say as to what's on the agenda?
I think that should be clarified, because what that could present is an issue where the city manager may seem that there's important items to discuss. And if it doesn't get on the agenda, it has to go to council to get on a future agenda. And council should be able to decide whether or not that information that comes from the city manager should be discussed that night. So I think it's more of working in collaboration. But the charter, nor our bylaws, nor Robert Rules of Order gives the presiding officer on any of our boards or the chair to remove an item unilaterally.
I didn't look at all of the boards, but Harbor Commission does it this way. And I looked at a couple cities surrounding us, and Alpena and St. Ignace both approve their agendas. So there are people other places that are doing it this way.
Bill Mulder, 372 West Summit. I can't comment on all the, what's right, what's wrong, what's legal, what's not. Just had an idea, if we wanted to ease into this, we could try this new process for 2 meetings in the month of February to see how it worked, and then decide. So, just a thought.
Thank you.
We do have Peter Askew on Zoom. Peter.
Hi, yes, actually, this is Ann Askew at 153 Zoll Street. I've been listening to this conversation, and I have to say, I think I concur. I definitely concur with the gentleman named Carter who spoke. Really, I have been involved, like Michael Berman, with a lot of boards that have followed Robert's Rules of Order. And it's always the executive branch that handles the agenda. And even our city charter, which I quickly looked up, states in Chapter 4, Section 4.4, that the mayor is the executive head of the city, so it's labeling that, and he shall preside at all meetings of the council. And Robert's Rules also says that it should be prepared in advance by the executive branch, with the presiding officer approving such agenda prior to publication. And also, following what Carter said about the Michigan Municipal League, you're a full member and you're disregarding what their standard is, which is a member presiding officer sets the agenda, and then it's set out by the city clerk with the supporting information. Well, our presiding officer is Mayor Tom Graham, and our city clerk is Nick Whitaker. So based on this information, city council isn't even in compliance with Robert's Rule of Order. But now you want to add this additional step, but you're picking and choosing the rules of order that meet your needs, whatever those strange needs are. And you've also had your city attorney say, I think maybe we should take a step back, table this discussion, look into the legality of it, and let everybody, including Tom and Wendy, who seem to be having a different point of view, everyone fully understand and get on the same page here. Because from what I can see and all the experience that I've had with this, a city manager is administrative, and your function is to follow the direction of the legislative body and enact that information that they've passed. But that's not what's happening now. If you're setting the agenda, it's the city manager's agenda. You have every right to put information on that through Tom Graham as your presiding officer and the executive branch. So help yourselves in this situation. Take a step back because it's not clear to anybody right now. And the city of Harbor Springs wants their city council to represent them and to support their mayor, because that's important in keeping a unified approach here. So take a vote, whatever you have to do, table this discussion and learn more about it. And maybe the city attorney can look further into the legality of the situation, and instead of thinking, maybe come back with a definitive answer. Thank you for listening.
Would be put to death, well on. Anything else?
There's nothing on the floor for a vote or anything, correct?
Correct.
It's up to you if you want to make a motion to amend it as presented in the packet. To add, the only request before us tonight was to add approval of the agenda onto the agenda.
And I think that's a very reasonable thing for council to approve the agenda. And I would make a motion to amend the council rules of order as proposed to include the approval of agenda on future agendas.
Approve at the start of the meeting, is that what you're saying, or?
As presented here, it would be after roll call.
As presented.
Nothing would change except for we would just be adding this additional.
That's the only request.
I'll second.
My only. Did you need to say your piece? Okay. Would be, are we interested at all in the suggestion of doing this for a couple of months, and if it becomes, we think it's unworkable, revisit it?
I think if it's unworkable and someone could ask that be an agenda item to remove the approval of the agenda. This is nothing that we do is written in cement. It can be undone if it's not working. I have the caveat, though, that yes, the mayor needs to take an active role in establishing the agenda. It should be consulting with the city manager. And if the mayor wants an item on the agenda, then that item, I think, should go on the agenda when he consults with the city manager. If I have a suggestion of an item to go on the agenda, I can direct that to Tom. And then Tom can take that to the city manager when he meets.
Sure.
We have a motion and a second. We'll do a roll call.
I just want to clarify. So if I understood you correctly, we've been communicating incorrectly and if we have any requests for the agenda, we direct them to Tom. Tom then collaborates with the city manager to produce the agenda.
I've certainly done that in the past. Last year with a different mayor, there was an issue that I was concerned about. I would not hesitate to bring it to his attention and say, do you think this is an appropriate item that we can discuss? So.
To the mayor.
Yes.
And I went that to the mayor.
Right, so instead of us communicating our agenda requests to Victor, we communicate them to the mayor. The mayor then collaborates with Victor to produce the agenda.
You can also bring it up at new and old business if it's something you want to present to the whole council.
Yeah, I have a few of those,
Yeah.
but I think I'll present them to Tom and let him put them on next month's or the next council meeting agenda. If he approves.
Okay, I see what you're saying, yeah.
So can you restate the motion?
So we have a motion and a second to add the approval of the agenda to the agenda for future meetings. Would you like a roll call?
Yeah.
Wendy Reeves.
Well, what's the point of approving in the agenda when it's already been published at the meeting?
Because you could propose to take something off. And we've done things like the last time when we had boards and commissions, we amended the agenda and we moved the boards and commission to the first so that the
Right.
entire audience. And so
Right.
now we have like an official moment to do that. So we've been doing it just without that on the agenda.
Okay, yes.
Jamie Melky.
Yes.
Tom Graham.
Yes.
Kathy Macho.
Yes.
Michael Behrman.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Okay, thank you. Moving on to the next agenda item is economic development strategy. This is not coming to council today for a vote, or this is coming to council for discussion. So one of the RRCs, or redevelopment ready communities, best practices is to have an economic development strategy. Sorry, so I'm gonna be writing on it. Oops. Just take that off. We'll go this way. The economic development strategy is created by the municipality, but the specific contents of it are not dictated by the RRC best practices. They ask for the cities to look at economic opportunities and challenges, include economic development goals and tasks, and address economic development initiatives, as well as make the strategy available to the public online. So the city's RRC committee and city staff worked on the strategy throughout 2024. In the fall, the Downtown Development Authority and the Planning Commission reviewed the strategy, and they offered comments and changes. What you saw in your packet is a result of all those discussions. We also had a survey that went out with some simple questions, some basic questions, and had some feedback from residents about strategy. We also had a notice in the newspaper and on our website for several months, asking for input from the economic development strategy as well. So the four basic categories are an overview, looking at where we are now, where do we want to go, and then how do we get there. There's a lot in that economic development strategy, as I'm sure you probably read. The four main goals were that Harbor Springs is comprised of a viable, community-oriented establishments that foster and recognize the city's resort and recreation theme. And I should caveat that most of these goals were taken from and kind of reworked based on our master plan goals for economic development, as well as our downtown visioning, 2012 downtown visioning goals. So we took those goals and took out the important ones that the committee felt were important, and then kind of reworked them a little bit. So that's where you get these goals. They weren't just created from thin air. So Harbor Springs will be home to a diverse mix of businesses and industries, attractively developed and maintained, providing meaningful employment opportunities and complement the character of the community. Harbor Springs will have a robust year-round economy offering diverse services and goods. And then Harbor Springs will increase its total number of year-round residents, strive for a balanced age structure with a median age in line with the state's median age of 40. So as I said, we also did a community survey on economic development. In general, the results suggested, and again, just take this with a grain of salt, there was, 37 city residents, I believe, and I think 80 something total residents who took this, 80 residents from the surrounding, 80 people took this survey in total, but 37 were city voters. Well, what we found from the comments, some common themes where the city needs more casual eating options. Yeah.
May I interrupt?
Go ahead.
I'm sorry. Given the hour, and this is a long document with a lot of information in it, does it make sense to everybody else to be going through this at this hour, this evening? I don't know how long it'll take, and there's a lot of information in there and a lot of stuff to absorb and discuss. Does anyone else on the council have another a thought about?
I read it all. I read it.
No, I read it,
Yeah.
but have I absorbed it and studied it and?
Well, the idea was to come back again, it's up to you. I mean,
Oh, okay, so I mean,
there's no decision needs to be made tonight, but if you feel like we're running late.
how much time were you gonna need to spend on your part of the presentation? Let me put
I
it
probably
that way.
have 3-4 more minutes.
Okay, then, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
You wanna watch a football game, don't
Actually, no, but I have to.
So the other common themes we saw in the survey results were the city needs more stores offering basic and everyday goods. About 50% of the respondents said that downtown has too many real estate offices. We also, common themes with downtown has too many high-end art galleries and high-end clothing stores. The most important goal was Harbor Springs would be home to a diverse mix of businesses and industries, while the least important goal was Harbor Springs will be comprised of viable community-oriented establishments. To mention, about 81 took the survey, 37 of those were city residents. If you isolated just the city residents' responses, the survey results were generally aligned with the overall survey results, except that Harbor Springs will have a robust year-round economy offering diverse services and goods was the most important goal. So yeah, the strategy is there. What we have, I'm not going to go through in detail, like I said, but what we do have is basic demographics. Spending quite a good amount of time on looking at what we have in our city and what we don't have in our cities as far as assets, and whether it's related to public services, commercial goods, parks, recreation, dining options, etc. We talk about opportunities and opportunities. Again, a lot of these were pulled from plans that we have with the city, as well as discussion amongst committee members. We talk about opportunities where we could potentially capitalize on certain parts of town or ideas. For example, recreation is a strong part of a Harbor Springs community. The theme, a lot of our plans and a lot of survey responses, we see recreation as pretty important. So, capitalizing on recreation is just one example, as an opportunity for economic development. We also talked about challenges, and you'll see here a few challenges. One that we hit pretty hard on was technology and communications. We've always had a lot of feedback about having issues with technology and communications being in a rural area, in a small rural area. So again, those are just challenges. How do we overcome those to promote economic development? Then we talk about our vision on where we want to be and our goals. And under that, there's also how do we get there? And those are our projects and tactics. So based on our other plans we have in the master plan, downtown vision plan, we look at how to get to those goals. And we have planning and policy tactics, we have infrastructure tactics, how do you address technology and communication? One of them, for example, is provide citywide wireless internet if it's possible. Look into that, right? So those are the kinds of things we're looking at, programming activities as well. And then, of course, there's an implementation matrix, as we have with all plans, to keep track of the progress we're making on reaching these goals. So there's a lot there. As I said, the DDA and the Planning Commission did review it, did have some input. And that was back in, I believe, November or so. Yeah. I'll just leave it to council. So what I'm really looking for council is, all right, what more do you want to see? What differently do you want to see? And what are your thoughts on it in general? Do you think the goals are good? Do you think we should, relook at goals and et cetera? No hard feelings. We did spend, I know, Janie's on the RRC committee, and we spent a long time, kind of analyzing this there. Too much time.
You have a city manager's report, or we covered that.
Whatever council wants, if we want to move on to city manager report.
There's just a lot of information in this that I'd like to absorb, and I'm not sure what the best format is for the council to, discuss all of this and how much detail we're going to be able to get into. And because it's an awful lot.
Then you'll get into a lot of detail. There's a lot, you'll get into a lot of detail.
That's right.
I think maybe if we all make sure to take a look at it, and if we have anything that we want to bring back for discussion at a later meeting.
Okay.
Instead of having to go through and discuss every single item, make a list of what you want to discuss and we can discuss it that way.
Okay.
That worked for everybody.
Yeah, I think it, I think there's a lot in the plan, and I think that it warrants, I think it warrants good discussion. I've read through it. It's hard to disagree with the goals, certainly. I think it would be hard for anybody to disagree with those. Those are great goals that I think I would hope that we'd all want for Harbor Springs, the goals portion. Some of the projects and the action plan, if you will, I have some questions about those things. There's about 18 or 19 or 20 action steps, and then they're on that matrix. And I do have some questions about some of the things on those. When we get into things like incentives and stuff like that. I think if we could, at some point, are we going to be asked to approve this?
Yes.
Okay. And I'm not sure if that discussion then should take place at that time. But I would imagine it's going to be a pretty lengthy discussion for us.
You would agree with that, well? Yeah. Let's all hone up on it and talk about it next month.
Sounds good.
I don't think not ready to vote on it.
Okay.
No.
There's one. There's a hand raised.
Mayor, may I ask one question,
You
please?
sure can, sir.
Yeah, Chip Everett, 4 Beach. Are the goals and action items based on a survey of 37 citizens?
No, the goals were based on the goals from the master plan and the downtown vision plan.
Okay.
Yeah, the survey was just asking people for their input on a couple things as well as the priorities of those goals.
Right, 37 people.
Yeah, there's not a lot of responses. No.
37 residents,
I don't
and I thought there
know
were
that
90, 80 or 90.
I don't know that anything that we found out in the survey or didn't find out in the survey changed
No.
what's in there. Because we had already discussed everything at length. And I mean, we spent probably 30 minutes one day trying to decide what category something silly went into. Like, we discussed it pretty at length.
Okay. Tiff Easterwood, just outside the city limits. Did you have any relationship between rewriting the master plan in terms of getting the RRC approved? Was there any correlation between I think back in April, you rewrote the master
No, the master plan
or
was,
amended?
no, the master plan was approved in April of 2022.
And did that have anything to do with the impending RRC requirements?
No, the master plan
Zero?
is required to be updated every 6 years. I think we were on our 7th year, and that's a state law that has to be updated every.
So it didn't, the RRC, those terms never came into discussion when you were working on the master plan? They were totally
I
separate?
don't, I think when we originally started with the RRC in 2019, we looked at, the planning commission looked at how it could be involved in the RRC process, but then COVID hit and we just basically disbanded with the RRC in 2020. And so those 2 years from 2020 and 2022 essentially was the planning commission just reviewing the master plan based on state law requirements.
But you had already in 2019 decided to go with the RRC, as I recall.
Yeah, but the master plan update is based on state law, which requires us to update the master plan.
I
every 6
understand that, but that's not what I'm asking.
Then I don't understand your question.
Is the master plan and the adoption of the RRC in any way related?
Well, the master plan is related to state law, and the RRC requires us to follow state law that the master plan be updated every 6 years as required. So that's the only thing.
Okay, I guess for.
If I
Maybe
can
that-
add into that,
Pardon, Jeff?
if I can add into that a little bit, because I was here at the time and Victor wasn't yet. You know, the processes were to some extent going on at the same time, but they were not linked together.
Just coincidental?
Yes, completely. At those early stages in the RRC, it was really just Rachel Smolensky, the previous DDA director, that was working on that. And it really hadn't expanded into anybody else's involvement.
How did it get expanded?
Well, and eventually it has to, through the RRC discussion, you have to have involvement from the planning commission and city council, so there's.
Okay, I see what you're saying.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We have a hand raised, Maureen Kenny.
Maureen Kenny, 134 West Bay Street. First of all, this economic development plan is purely written for a checkbox for RRC certification. RRC only requires that you have a plan. They don't care what the plan says. The summary results, once again, small number of respondents to make decisions on unreliable data is wrong. At a prior, I don't know if it was a city council meeting or a PC meeting, when Victor indicated that he wrote the last planning zoning survey, 2 members in the audience came forward and said they would help with professional surveys. They were in the space. I don't remember there was 2 males. I don't remember their names. I asked that any survey going forward be written by an outside professional to eliminate bias and improve reliability and usable data. Lastly, to say we need to shift our median age from 62 plus to 40, you say that's the state standard. Harbor Springs is not adhering to state standards. And to put it in writing that the retirees no longer support the task base since they aren't working, and that they are a burden on our healthcare resources, to me was quite personally offensive. In this world of DEI, that is discriminatory against anybody 62 and plus. The 60 plus group here are the ones having coffee every morning when you walk into the coffee shop. They're buying the expensive toys at Rocking Horse for their grandkids. They're buying art and they're buying gurney sandwiches. The 40-year-olds are scrambling all day to work, chase their kids, get homework done, figure out what to do for dinner. Every age is a viable person in this community. I ask that this economic development plan be tabled for more thought and effectiveness, and not to just check a box for RRC. As Tom Graham said when he ran successfully for this office and won, quote unquote, the economy will set itself. So please, City Council, let the economy set itself. Thank you very much.
Got appointment to the planning for the Harbor Commission. I'd like to make a motion to appoint Jim Bartlett back onto the Harbor Commission. Anybody, you guys that don't know Jim, he's been on there forever, but he does a great job. I've been on that commission before and he's very thorough and very capable. Done a good job for probably 30 years or more.
I'll second that.
Any discussion?
I'm gonna echo what I said, the previous meeting when we were doing appointments and commissions. JB is incredible, with all the things that he does. One of the things that we've heard, though, I've heard from a lot of people was, 10 terms, give someone else a chance for leadership. And I truly believe that, even though I think Jim is incredible. I just think that it's time for new leadership, passing the torch. Thank you.
I agree with Michael. I think JB's great, but he's been on the Harbor Commission since 1989, I think. And that's almost as long as I've been alive. And so I just think that, it is good for change every once in a while.
Change for change reason is a reason. There's many good people out there who will do the job as well as he's doing. I don't think you'll find anybody.
I have also heard lots of comments from people as we've been through this process last month and this month. And comments across the board were, we want to encourage new people on these commissions, people that have not been on this commission. Previously at a council meeting, maybe a year ago, I believe I just brought this up at the council and at the Harbor Commission, that we needed to be getting new people involved in order to have, so we have somebody who can take over. Because we've had somebody who's been for so long that maybe he wouldn't want to do it anymore. I understand he does. He said that. I understand he said that now, but I think we have to look for the future. And there are people that have been on the commission for a while. There are other people that have been on it. So we have people there, and I'm just concerned that this establishes a different precedent separate from what we were told during a lot of the process before we chose the commissions in December. So.
Well, there's a motion and a second on the table.
New people don't always have new ideas, hopefully they do.
Would you like a roll call?
Yes.
Michael Behrman,
No.
Kathy Machel,
No.
Tom Graham,
Yes.
Jamie Melky,
No.
Wendy Reed.
Yes.
I believe that motion fails.
I would like to nominate Karen Straw Donnelly for Harbor Commission. I'm also going to just say before if it's seconded, Karen has been on the Harbor Commission for one term, and she's one term to me, is not a long time. She has a wide range of experience, at our waterfront, kayaking, paddling, boating. She's been on other boards and commissions and has a track record of incredible dedication and commitment, creative ideas, and is a team player. So it's for that reason that I would nominate Karen Straw Donnelly.
I'll second.
Yeah, motion is made and seconded. Any discussion? Karen?
You have 16 people who are applying for this, and you just used as your argument for striking Tom's choice that he's been on it for too long and she's already been on it, and you have people applying for the job who haven't been on it. So you're being hypocritical.
I think serving one term is different than serving for 10 terms. And I think if we look at nominations and appointments that I have either seconded or voted yes on for all the commissions, I think you're going to see a lot of new people on those. I also look at qualifications, and that to me is very important. A person's qualifications, their dedication, again, 10 terms is different than one term.
So I agree, but Leroy Kramer listed on his that he is a marine attorney. George Pete just appeared here tonight and he is a professional sailor. And Larry Mosier is our marine officer for the city. So all of them probably are more qualified than somebody who, and I don't mean anything personal against Karen. It's not at all personal. But if you're going to use the argument that you have been on it before and we want new bodies, then you've already been on for one term. And by the way, when the DDA appointments came along, you appointed somebody for another 4-year term who's already been on for 6 years.
I disagree in regard to Karen's qualifications. I think she's exceptional. And as you suggest, I am no way downgrading others. Again, I view that one term, having served one term, is different than having served 10 terms. And let's just say that that's how I feel. And you have every right to vote as you please on this.
I think another thing that is important is that we want diversity, and I don't know that anybody else on the current Harbor Commission is an avid paddler. I know one person, is she a paddler too?
Oh, not sure. Kayak, I know.
I think a lot of, yeah, I thought kayak too. But I think we have a lot of boaters. So it's nice to have the kayaker and the paddleboard side of it as well.
And with one of the issues that makes how we've been doing this appointment process challenging this year is because we have had so many applications. And so there's a much bigger pool to choose from. So, and to be able, and to take each person, and so I understand some of your suggestions and they're good ones, but it may be that there's, I'm only gonna have one chance. If this person, if Karen's nomination doesn't pass, then there'll be somebody else. If I don't promote that person I mean, that's my difficulty is I can't rank people when I've only got one option. So our selection process has made this a bit of a challenge. But there are also things that I might have had reasons for not choosing or nominating or preferring someone else. But there may be reasons that, I mean, you brought up someone who is, yes, qualified, but was on the Harbor Commission and resigned. So prior. So do I want to reappoint somebody who had been on that commission? Maybe I'm wrong, but that's my memory.
Nobody resigned.
He was on planning and
Was
resigned.
he on planning? And
Yeah.
I apologize. Was on planning and he resigned. Oh, okay. So I mean, it's like someone who was, appointed and then chooses not to complete their term. I question, that brings questions in my mind.
And-
So
I think too, Wendy, you refer to my actions as being hypocritical. I'd like to ask, were you at the meeting in which we nominated and approved commissions and boards?
Yes, I was, not physically present.
Right, but you weren't a
In
voting,
fact, it was 4 in the morning when
you
you.
weren't a voting member though, and
And I didn't understand, I could have actually seconded, but all it would have done would be to force you guys to vote.
No, you cannot second. You can, Michigan.
you
law
couldn't
does
take
not
any
allow.
actions.
So then I could,
But I guess
I apologize.
I don't, okay,
And-
I just don't
Further,
appreciate.
you appointed 3 out of 4 people to it. 3 of them were all previously on it. And they were term limited off and you put them back on.
Again, I'm gonna say that I was present at the meeting and there were a lot of applicants. Boards and commissions, a lot of it depended on what order things went in. It was a very complex process and I looked at who, I probably like everybody else, looked at the applications and came in who I felt was the most qualified for each, balanced whether they are new, whether they served one term, part of a term. A lot of those people served a part of a term. So it was a very complex process, but I just, if you're gonna refer to me as being hypocritical,
I don't mean to
then-
offend you. I'm sorry.
that's fine, but I also will bring up the fact that it was a complex process and there were 4 council people here.
And I'm not criticizing what you did, but when you bring up the fact that you're going to strike someone because they've already been there and then you promote people who've already been there, you're setting a different standard.
I think I've made it clear that 10 years is a long time. I'm just gonna leave it at that.
There's a motion, a second. I want some clarification on the length of the term. So if you notice in my memo, this term expires and there's 1 year left. This would be to fill a vacant term, as I explained in the memo, the situation where at the last meeting, we appointed Chip to the planning commission, but I did not point out at that time that that you only can serve, if you serve on the planning commission, you can't serve on another board except the ZBA. So I'd asked Chip to decide which one to resign from. He had 1 year left, 1 year left in his term on the Harbor Commission. So we have, this term could be to fill, this appointment could be to fill a 1 year term. But we have 5 people coming off in 2025 from the Harbor Commission. So I think council, this would be an opportunity to decide if you want to make it a 1 year term or a 2 year term. Or longer, just depends on news. We don't have 5 people coming off at 2025. There's a whole process for how this came to be, that we have so many people coming off in 2025, but
We want all new people, it sounds like, so that'll make it easy.
So just if you want it to be a 1 year, if your motion was for a 1 year or to fulfill the term or for longer, that's just well, to clarify so we know.
We're in the process though of working on a motion already, right?
Right, but I just
We
need
need
to,
to know how many years.
otherwise it's just gonna go to fill the vacant term for 1 year, so I wanna fill it to vacant. for 1 year.
I would recommend doing 2 years to have it expire in 2026, just to stagger it one more since we don't have anyone expiring in 2026.
Michael, this is your motion, so would you like to amend that, or are you happy as it stands?
I'll amend it based on council member Melky's recommendation.
For a 2 year term to expire in 2026.
Kathy, you seconded it. Are you happy with the
Yes,
amendment?
I will second the amended motion.
We're ready for a roll call. Kathy Machel,
Yes.
Tom Graham,
Yes.
Jamie Melky,
Yes.
Wendy Reed.
Yes.
You didn't.
Michael Behrman,
Yes.
motion passes.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, moving up quickly to the city manager's report. We did receive our sanitary survey report from the state, from the EGLE, which is the Michigan Department of Environmental Grading and Energy. They found it's a great news, they found no deficiencies in our water source treatment, distribution, monitoring or security. But our reliability study needs to be updated in 2025, which Lucas and DPW will work on. The report also includes some suggestions or recommendations such as installing panic bars on the well house doors, installing the chemical injection taps in a different way to prevent corrosion, and for the city to conduct a rate study. And actually before I received this, we did go to council in December to ask for a rate study, so we'll be going forward with that. The Court of Appeals will be hearing the Andrew Potter lawsuit oral arguments on February 5th. So expect an update sometimes after that. As far as activity, it's been quite busy. I won't keep you too long for this. We did have several meetings, boards and commission meetings. ZBA approved the dimensional variance on Bluff Drive. Planning Commission held its organizational meeting. They'll be meeting this Thursday as well to discuss the zoning code. RRC committee reviewed and discussed economic development incentives, and the Parks Board had its organizational meeting and discussed what you kind of discussed here. And I had some typical standard meetings, CCE 911 and MMEA webinar on Public Act 95, which has some state law on changes on how we approach low income energy assistance. So you'll probably see some more from us on that in the future as well. Something else that I not include in here is we are following the sick time act in Michigan, which is probably going to go into effect in February, which has some changes to how we have to how many hours we give to individuals for sick time. It shouldn't be a problem for our full-time employees because they are covered with their PTO generally, but there's some changes in there that would affect some things, especially for our part-time employees probably. So, but there's going some revisions are going through that in the House, in the Michigan legislature as we speak now, so that could change in a month. So we'll be up to date on that. So yeah, things are changing. That's all I got. Any questions for me? All right, Mayor, I think we are.
New world business, anybody want to talk about?
I would like to propose that we take a look at our applications for applying for city boards and committees. And see if we can make the applications better. Just so that they're filled out thoroughly and that we could make maybe better and more qualified decisions. I know that one thing that I've seen on other cities' applications is there's a box that says, are you available to attend the meetings? And I think that that's a valid question.
To piggyback off of that, I don't know if it's possible to have a special meeting dedicated to just giving people that apply an opportunity to just open mic for 3 minutes on why they're why they want to be on a board or commission, maybe part of a regular meeting, I don't know, but I think that it wouldn't be a requirement, but it would be a time when they could come here or participate via Zoom even. So, because it's a very hard decision. So I would agree, maybe re-looking at the application and yes, very difficult decisions.
Anybody got anything else?
Okay, I just wanted to follow up on something that we discussed in October, I believe, with some interim financial reports. I'm sorry to bring this up when Nick's not here, but he had provided us some, you and he, I guess, together had provided us some interim financial information. And I just wanted to follow up on how we were gonna do that and if we could make some additional changes to that. I don't know what's the best process, so I thought I'd bring it up now.
So to add as an agenda item, because we were, as a quarterly reports is what we were going to.
Was okay, because we had the end of the third quarter, but
the new quarter was this, the budget being adopted, so that's January 1st, and then, so there's really nothing to report yet in the first. I mean, there's nothing.
oh,
in the
that's
first, so it's,
okay. Okay.
that was the plan, that's what we talked about every quarter.
Okay, thank you for clarifying that.
Before we move on, I know Wendy has some comments. Do we want to, by consensus, add the item that Jamie and Michael talked about on the future agenda item? The application process and is there?
Make a more simple application.
Yeah.
The consensus?
Yeah.
I think that's fine.
That's fine.
I would love to discuss it further. He will put it on because I did that by consensus.
The council's directing you to put it on the agenda.
I'm wondering, Patrick Gibbons, Arbor Street, November 18th City Council meeting mentioned that a failing section of Pine Street needed to be addressed. And I'm wondering, did anybody put that on their agenda?
Yeah, it's one of the CIP items for the chip seal.
Okay, so his concerns have been taken care of.
It will be addressed. Yeah, it's not something that can just be taken care of at that point. It's a one.
No, I'm just worried that people throw things out there and they fall through the cracks, so.
No, it's been addressed.
And then the last thing, none of the board meeting minutes have been posted, and I'm wondering why it's taking so long to get them on.
What, the council meetings?
So we had a December 2nd, a December 6th, December 9th. We just approved so I could understand why the December.
I emailed Nick about that because I noticed that, and we didn't have the signed versions back. So I told him that he should go, he's sick today, to post the unsigned versions. I think the mayor has the signed versions. You should have those. So,
but none of the committee members for December have been posted.
So December, because December ones are being approved in January by the board. So we'll post, for example, the planning commission will post, we'll have theirs posted, and as well as the tree board was just approved theirs on Friday. The harbor commission is approving theirs on tomorrow. So those boards that meet in January, those December minutes will get approved in January, so they'll go on. But the ones from December 2nd for council is because we didn't have the signed minutes back.
Okay.
But yeah, I try to keep on top of that, and staff knows I bug them all the time about minutes.
Guess we're adjourned then. Everybody's got their coats on. Tomorrow.
Well, so we're around all that.